Recording in progress.
Thank you, Melissa.
Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2022 City Council meeting. We're starting this evening early with a work session to review some follow-up questions and discussion regarding the housing need and economic opportunity assessments that we've been working on. And I think we have both Jamie and Dawn here to take us through and review and or give us the answers to our thought-provoking questions. Well, you guys got up simultaneously.
We practiced that.
I bet you did.
We did our run through and we practiced to make sure that we stood up at the same time. So we're operating.
Jamie looks to present this.
What was that?
I love how excited you seem to present this.
This is exciting stuff.
It is
Good stuff.
It's we're really excited. So Jamie Stickle, director of he's moving the microphone. Director of Economic Development. I'm sure Gordon is thinking that I speak loud enough without it right in front of me. And Don Hardy, our planning director. And so we came before you at the last city council. We had a joint work session with the planning commission and then obviously the city council. And our consultant team, they provided lots of information and you guys had some questions. We kind of took a look at that presentation, streamlined some things. Hopefully we got the answers to your questions in this presentation. But if we didn't, or if something is sparked when we are talking, either interrupt us or we will be happy to provide more answers as we go on. I know that Dawn is going to kind of kick us off, but as a reminder, we've been working on an economic opportunity analysis and a housing needs analysis. And both of those items are part of the long-range planning efforts that are underway. Dawn is leading those, and eventually they will inform our comprehensive plan update, transportation system plan update, and potential or possible UGB expansion.
Thank you, Jamie. Don Hardy, Planning Director, and good evening, Mayor Hodgson and council members. First slide, Jamie. So I wanted to give a quick overview. We met with a joint session on October 19th, and this is a follow-up, as Jamie has mentioned. Tonight, we're really seeking some input from the council on housing strategies, also on the growth scenarios, low, medium, and high. Additionally, we're seeking input on the Canby Community Development Vision Statement and the new economic development objectives. So I wanted to walk through, because there's a lot of information we've been throwing at you in terms of a schedule, and hopefully this is not overwhelming, but I wanted to give some context in terms of the housing needs analysis, housing production strategy, and then there'll be a few slides on the anticipated comprehensive plan. That's not the focus of tonight's discussion, but I felt like it was important to fit all this into what we're discussing and how does it all kind of come together. So tonight we're again seeking direction on the housing policies, and that's the first thing we're focusing on. The housing production strategy, which are the strategies that we will talk about tonight, will be a big part of that. There'll be a draft prepared in December that will go to our advisory committee for the final fourth meeting for that advisory group in January. There'll be a public open house in January as well, and that's to review the housing production strategy elements. Early February, we're looking at preparing the final housing production strategy and going to Planning Commission in February and into Council in March. So the other side of the coin is the economic opportunity analysis schedule, which is similar. So again, November, December, draft economic opportunity report and policy measures, and we'll be talking about those elements tonight. The draft vision statement, economic objectives, and also low, medium, and high pieces of that. And then January, there'll be the public open meeting, which will be combined with the housing meeting. It'll be in January. Similarly, we'll have a final economic opportunity analysis completed in February, and then in February, and we'll also have a planning commission hearing, and in March, we'll have the council hearing for the adoption of that. So next slide, Jamie. So how this dovetails into the comprehensive plan and transportation system plan, there'll be some overlap between these two ongoing processes. There'll be on November 16th hearing for council, we'll have a scope of work for the comprehensive plan, and that actually, it goes over a 3 fiscal year period. So I wanted to give a little preview to that. So hopefully that's helpful in the context here. The anticipation hopefully will be that by December 7th, second reading, that we will have a scope of work and the consultant on board and ready to move forward. So the first part of that fiscal year is 22-23. The 6-month period will include a lot of initial outreach and visioning, really setting up the project, addressing policy and plan regulatory review, transportation existing conditions, study framework and assumptions. We'll be looking at intersections. There's, I believe, 46 of them that will be evaluated in the city for level of service volume to capacity will be reviewed in that time period. So that is the scope of work that will be coming forward to you, just the 6-month piece, because budgets are approved within a fiscal year time frame. But this is a continuation process, and so the next piece of that, Jamie, can you advance, please? Would be 23-24, and that's continued work. This is the lion's share of the work that would be done on the comp plan. Additional continued outreach, community summits, surveys, project webpage, continuation of those, and then a visioning process that's very robust. Very important for I think, for the community to be involved in this entire project, and that's what we want. Project advisory group will be there involved in this, and also a transportation technical advisory committee will be involved. There'll be scenario planning. The scenario planning will address 4 scenarios for the urban growth boundary, as well as other planning within the city. So it's both outside of the city for urban growth boundary and inside the city. There'll be the draft comprehensive plan will be prepared in this time frame over this period. Urban growth boundary assessment and amendment submittal will occur in this period of time, and system development charge updates will start to be evaluated and will be fairly well along in that process. And then the final year, Jamie, can you advance? Will be 24-25. There'll be some additional project advisory committee meetings, planning commission and city council updates. There'll be a final comprehensive plan and transportation system plan adoption by council and the Clackamas County Board of County Commissioners. The urban growth boundary will be submitted, and this will be the time period will start for that process. Hopefully that will go without any hitches. And that process can run 120 days after it's submitted, and that goes through DLCD, and hopefully it doesn't go through the land use board review process, but DLCD just accepts it. So yeah.
DLCD is the Department of Land Conservation and Development, which Don received 3 grants from to fund this work, and they've been partnering with us through every step of the process. So they're informing the stakeholders, the committee members, and they're participating in the process, which if this moves forward with a UGB expansion, that's beneficial because then they are very aware of the process that we've gone through, the reason behind the decisions that are ultimately going to be made, and then those decisions, and it won't be a surprise to them.
Thank you, Jamie. So there shouldn't be any surprises since they've already funded the project through the grant process. So thank you. That's great information. So jumping back to the focus tonight, and this really is about why we want your input tonight, and just a little refresh on this, that about 6,000 people are projected over the next 20 years. I know there was some discussion and debate as to whether or not those numbers are accurate by PSU, but those are kind of our numbers we have to live with. So that's the first thing, is the 6,000 people forecasted in the next 20 years. Next slide, Jamie. So I think, what's really important in the broad scheme of this work and what we're doing is that middle housing is needed to support a continued varied city population balanced between young and older residents. That's really what this slide essentially says is that without middle housing, this community will look different in 20 years. Go ahead, next slide. So the forecast in terms of housing units is about 2,236 units. You can see kind of the breakdown of those. Most of that is single-family detached homes, but there's some manufacturing and cottage homes. It's another line item. Townhomes and plexes and multifamily makes up that composition.
Don, can I ask a quick question
Yeah,
on that? So if you can go back to that last slide, Jamie. Just for clarification, and I don't have that in my notes, so I apologize. So the 2236 that we're looking at in terms of new dwellings over the next 20 years, that's in addition to what's already in the pipeline for us to do as of this
Yes.
year and next.
Yep, that's the forecast of the needed housing based on the population future.
Okay, so it doesn't, but what I'm saying is it's above and beyond what we already have.
It's above and beyond.
Already in the pipeline.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the next slide is really kind of a breakdown on the acreages that would be required. And you can again see about 158 acres beyond the current city boundaries. This is expansion is what we're talking about here. 158 acres, single family detached manufacturing homes and cottages is what that composition would be made up of. And about 12 acres of multifamily is forecasted to be needed. So in total, about 147 acres. Next slide, Jim. And so the takeaways really from what has occurred for the housing assessment so far is really housing affordability relates to housing product type. And a mix of housing types needed to meet the demand and affordability. Attracting younger families to the community were required of varied housing product types, which could include smaller single-family lots, townhomes, condos, cottages, and apartments. There was a lot of conversation around making things compatible and consistent with city standards, and also looking beyond those standards to make things successful in terms of how it looks. And so design standards, we would obviously anticipate needing more focus on those as the mix of housing continues to evolve. And I think the real issue here is the city can support more affordable housing for the community through adoption of housing strategies. And I just wanted to give a little segue to the strategies, and I'll turn this over to Jamie on that piece of it. The strategies really are focusing on kind of the broad brush elements that a high-level way of identifying areas and making housing more affordable. The assumption on the strategies that they will be implemented over a number of years. The Department of Land Conservation and Development actually assumes that they would be implemented over an 8-year period. That's a long time, but I think several of these could be implemented more quickly. And any of those strategies that are identified that are supported by council would have further refinement to them. And obviously the council would be involved, and so would the planning commission in terms of recommendations of going forward. But they do frame up what could be done to help on affordability. So with that, I'll turn that over to Jamie.
Can I ask you real quick before Jamie starts? How does the projected growth over the next 20 years compare to the growth that we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years? I know one of the things that we hear a lot is the rampant growth of Canby. As we're looking at the size of the city now, like how does that compare to the growth that we've been seeing for the last several years?
I think in the last council meeting, I think it probably is underestimating. We're seeing some softening in the market now, but I mean, the last 2 years in particular, I mean, that's probably what I can speak to most. It was record level permitting. We're seeing less housing. I think some of that is interest rate driven. There's some less optimism perhaps, and I don't know what the election's going to do, but I'm guessing that's going to perhaps help in that process in terms of advancing that. There's still advancing homes, but we're not seeing at this current point the level that we saw previously. But I would say what we have seen probably for the last 2 to 5 years has probably outpaced, in my opinion, the PSU numbers.
And outpace what we'll see over the next.
Yeah, but it's again, that's kind of a spectrum, because I don't know how much. I mean, that was probably an unusually heavy amount, and I guess what's normal. I mean, that's part of that. And we know that there's still. I mean, housing affordability is still not there, and so people are still seeking homes. It's just, I think part of it is there's now fewer of them because they're not building as many.
The last 2 years has been a strange anomaly anywhere, But
I think it has. I mean, I think part of that is this is a very desirable place to live. This metro area is very desirable, and I think people see that. Our weather's great. I mean, got all the amenities here that we have anywhere else in the U.S. And so I think it's very attractive for people, and people are continuing to move here, and they're moving here, I think largely because we have jobs here, and they think that's a big attractor. So. Again, it is an interesting dynamic in terms of the one thing I will say about PSU is, unlike other states where they do low, medium, and high forecasts, and they give that authority to the jurisdiction to choose what your destiny is going to be. The counterpart is Washington State does the low, medium, and high, is that you're able to give yourself a projection that fits your community more, and I think that the PSU numbers, I would probably think would be not on the high end, would be more on the low to medium end, would be my belief.
Perfect. Thanks, Don.
Well, and it's interesting when you're planning for such important items such as housing and the economic future of your community, that there is so much that plays into that. So, Don said the Portland Metro is very attractive to many people who want to move here. That's true. But also we've found and we've heard, and I had a conversation earlier today with somebody who was saying, about the number of people who are moving out of the Portland Metro into the suburbs, whether that's residents moving out or businesses moving out. And so with the changes and the growth that Canby has seen over the last 2 years or 5 years, some of that is, as we continue to grow, we have more offerings. Some of that is also a byproduct of things that might be happening in metros nearby that make people say, well, I wouldn't mind living a little bit further out for a little bit different pace, potentially is a nice way to say it. I think one of the nice things, obviously there's positives and negatives with any sort of long range forecasting, but one of the nice things I think that with Oregon using PSU and that is the standard, then it's the standard across the board for all the communities. So at the very least, if it's, I guess this isn't great, but if it's wrong, it's a kind of a wrong across the board, meaning that they didn't forecast that many people would be coming in, but they are always updating that information. They do keep it up to date regularly, so that can be flexible as we go and grow. And so if we got 200 people moving in next year and 400 the following, and it averages out to that 300, then we're at least getting closer to the end goal. So one of the things that we wanted to readdress is the strategies to meet future housing. And so these strategies, I'm going to go through each one of these categories, and the way that the strategies were written, they had identified basically a laundry list, and for as many as we saw, I'm sure there's tenfold more. So what Don and I decided to do is that we actually decided to break them out. Originally it was asterisks of, if it was one asterisk, it was because it was something that the city had recently done, and then the other would be that there was support by staff or committee members. So we wanted to kind of break that apart so that it was very easy to see what has already been done. Some of this is best practices, keeping up with the laws. There's been House bills that have been, required certain changes. And then also to really highlight that the green items, the one that has shown, we've seen preliminary support by consultants, staff, and stakeholders. And those stakeholders are the housing committee members, but also there was a survey that went out, an open house that happened, the first open house rather. And so that there is support and best practices to kind of support those projects moving forward, or those concepts moving forward rather. And then the items that did not have anything attached to them, we removed those from these slides just to make it easy on what is likely to be focused on. But we're also happy to provide the original slide deck to you guys. I know that Don did, but provide it again, or at least provide a comparison just so that you can see. So recently implemented by the city of Canby, as far as creating new development opportunities, revising the development code to allow duplexes. And I believe that was based off of a House Bill
2001.
Yes. And then as far as housing policy strategies around zoning and code changes, with preliminary support, develop criteria and process for identifying land to upzone, allowing cottage clusters. And I know at that October 19th meeting, we talked a lot about cottage clusters and what that was and what it could be here in Canby. Multifamily residential buildings in downtown. Obviously, we have one, and so we've been able to see how great it can be, but that we can grow. There's definitely room to have more. Expand mixed-use zoning, and one of the ways that we saw that as a potential and was talked about in one of the housing meetings was around Highway 99. Having where you're able to have a building like the Dahlia right on Highway 99. On a highway commercial. And then again, designs to promote aging in place. As we've talked about here and in probably various other places, Canby is getting older. Sometimes it looks like it's trending older. So how do we allow for that aging in place? Not everybody wants to buy a 2-story home, because if you're going to live there for the next 10 years and you are in your later years, it might be harder to get up and down the stairs. As far as category B, so that's reduced regulatory impediments. And this one did not have anything in the blue category, which was something that had been recently implemented by the city. So only the preliminary support. Remove development barriers. So reduce the minimum lot sizes in single family zones, but also with the caveat of encouraging the design guidelines to go with that. So it's not just, tiny homes, tiny spaces right next to a large mansion, some sort of design guidelines so that it is a seamless look and feel. Identify opportunities to streamline PUDs, lower off-street parking requirements. And then as far as financial strategies go, so there were incentives and then resources. One incentive recently implemented was identify high priority infrastructure projects. And then as far as the financial incentives for that had preliminary support, incentives that encourage developers to build PUDs, provide density bonuses for affordable housing, modify SDC fee schedules, and then I've included financial resources. That was on that slide deck, but none of the actual items underneath had any sort of qualifier attached to it. So just financial resources to support those efforts. And then this slide had 2 different categories. So tax exemption and abatement, and then land acquisition, lease, and partnerships. Recently implemented as far as land acquisition, lease, and partnerships, monitor residential land supply and housing inventory, develop partnerships with nonprofits, and then the support aspect, tax exemption and abatement, which could be something like nonprofit, low-income rental housing exemptions. And then finally, category Z was the custom options. So community outreach, housing need focused, and conduct development barriers audit. Those have been recently implemented. And then as far as with the preliminary support, updating the housing needs periodically. We have not done that in quite some time, so we are working on that actively. And then education for property owners and developers, and amend commercial zoning to permit mixed-use commercial housing development. And I think this is,
Could we pause maybe, Jamie, and see if council has any questions on that? So I'll take the next slide there. So just some more background information. We've counted in Commissioner Varwig, Councilor Varwig mentioned the question about existing projects that we have in the pipeline. In part, I know this is slightly off topic, but in terms of looking at what we have in the pipeline, this is important in terms of our buildable lands evaluation. The one caveat that we recently discovered with the state is that they only include projects in terms of being committed. And if they have a building permit, they're committed. And that's a pretty long ways down the process in terms of factoring that in. So there is a little bit of a conservative lens the state is providing on that. So for example, employment lands, you could go through and be in that pipeline map that's shown here because you've gone through a land use entitlement process. And you may actually be going through on a residential side, a platting process. And we're looking at that as pipeline, as being committed, but the state does not really consider them committed unless a building permit is issued. So the lens here is a little bit as well. This is an Oregon-focused requirement, but essentially what this means as we advance these slides, in particular on the recommendations from the advisory committee for the employment side of things, is they recommended a medium growth rate. They were not aware, however, of this information that the state, which they just recently provided to us, that they are looking at that based on building permit issuance. So that means that land that could be, in our opinion, committed because it has entitlements and people have bought property would not be considered to be would be considered to be vacant and not committed. So just, I don't want to make this too confusing, but it's a way that the state has calibrated this, and it's a requirement they have for buildable lands. So I guess the end result here is the medium growth rate would likely have been looked at perhaps between medium and high growth rate by the advisory committee had they had that information. Yes. Councilor Parker.
I apologize, Don, but I'm missing the linkage here between building permits and population. It's my understanding that the number of people living in households has changed in the last 20 years. And so if we're building 100 houses, what's the assumption of the number of people that are moving into those houses? And following that up with the missing middle, it sounds like we want to have houses big enough for families, but we want to build them cheaper than they are being built now. So can you explain the magic behind those two?
And I'll take those, try to answer those questions. I think the first thing, hopefully, just to clarify on what we're looking at in terms of acreage demand for moving forward for both housing and employment. The point is that one slide that we had that showed 146 acres of demand for residential. That demand is forecasted in the future for what we need. The state, however, will be looking at vacant land as vacant unless it has a building permit on it. So projects that are in the pipeline, let's say a subdivision is in the pipeline, and let's say they even have platted that property, until building permits are all issued on those individual lots, the state will consider them vacant. So that I think for the residential side is just an awareness that that we absolutely need every acre that we are forecasting for housing. And then on the employment side, it makes a difference on what we can control. We really can't control the acreage on housing because that's set by the state in terms of what they're saying the formula is. But on the employment side, we have the ability to say what we want that forecast to be based on low, medium, or high. I'm just making the point that I don't want to undercount on the employment side. I don't want to undercount the acreage that, let's say that there's a commercial warehouse building that was through a land use entitlement process. I just want to make sure that you're aware going forward that the projection is that property will be counted as vacant unless a building permit is issued on that.
I'll get to the industrial land later.
Sure.
I still want to understand the linkage. If let's say we adopt the fact that there's going to be a need, that 6,000 people are going to move here in the next 20 years, and that as a result we need 140 acres to house them. Embedded in that has to be a formula that says how many people are going to be in each unit. And I want to know what that is, because everything I've been reading is that there are more people living alone, and the anecdotal evidence is that the people that are moving into some of the new houses are just two people, that they're not families. So I'm not sure we've got this all synced together here.
Sure.
We've got a population goal and we've got a acreage goal. How do we know that acreage goal is going to fill that need if we don't know how many people, how many units are going to be put on those acres? Do we have that answer? And then how many people are going to be in those houses?
That's that.
Did I get that right?
No, you did, and because it's right. We go by, great. The average household is 2.3 people. What makes up that 2.3? You're presuming is that two adults and what is that mix, and how do we know that? And then I think it goes back to the conversation of how are we, the decisions and things we're looking at now are for things 20, 30 years down the road. What is that going to look like? What does that projection look like? If it's, so is it more 1-story, 3-bedroom, homes for 1 or 2 people? Is that the direction we plan for, or is it families of 4, 5, and 6?
Do we need to build 1,000 square foot houses or 3,000 square foot houses?
Right.
And to your, I don't have the exact number, and I mean what that multiplier is, but the vast majority of the demand is single family residential. Of that split on the 2,236, there was about 1,400 that were single family. We can get you that number in terms of what that exactly is.
And what is a single family?
Well, I know that number has gone down. To your point, I want to acknowledge that it used to be around 2.7, and it became 2.5, and I'm not sure what that number is per household.
And anecdotally, I'm noticing households that people are buying in the new subdivisions, and 2 people are moving into it. I don't have anything statistical. I'd love to get my hands on that. But there's also this other thing called gray divorce that's going on, that more and more older people are living by themselves. And I just want to make sure as we spend all this money and all this time to take a look at these things, that we actually have things synced up with the reality of what we're facing. Councillor Varwig says, it could be that the true projections of where we're going to be in 10 years is a whole bunch of smaller units. Now, if we want to do some social engineering, which I do, I want to see youngsters in the schools playing baseball and running around. But that's going to require 2,300 square feet, you would think. But we haven't been able to build a 2,300 square foot house under 500,000. So maybe we're asking you to do the impossible, but I'd like us at least to be honest with citizens of what we're dealing with here, that we're seeking to do something that's never been done before, which is to come up with a housing strategy that meets the market demands of where people are and what they can afford. And then finally, let me just put in a pitch for workforce housing. We could reduce 4,000 people driving in and out of the city every day if the people who work here could afford it. which is also part of the missing middle. I'm sorry, Don, I was going to stay out of this completely today, but when you're talking about the state's assumptions,
Yeah.
I want to know how that is actually linked
Yep.
to real numbers. If they're saying 140 acres would house 6,000 people, then show me the number, show me the formula between that.
Well, and one of the things I was going to say is, while it's not in this presentation, I believe that in one of the other presentations we received from the consultants, that information of who or how many on average in each kind of different residential property. It's the words I was looking to put together to form the rest of my sentence. But I was noticing that even on here, it notes that, you know, there's group quarters where it's not necessarily a family or a couple, but people who are saying, hey, if you can afford this much rent and I can afford this much rent, and we both, you know, want to live in Canby, we could pool our money together. And that there's assumptions based on how many people there, and that was, I think, 1.5. So I know that they have the numbers, our consultant team does, and we will be happy to get those and report back to you guys.
Brian, I'm sorry.
So continuing, this kind of leads us to the discussion on growth scenarios. And Jamie, you want to take it over on the growth scenarios?
Yeah. So one of the things that that you have heard us talk about and that we've spoken about in our housing advisory committee is about the growth scenarios that could be applied. So low growth, medium, high growth, and there are various numbers associated with each one of those items. You know, as we talk about what happened in the last 2 years or 5 years, is that high growth? Is that medium growth? And what do we want it to be in the future? Some of that, even with planning and proper planning, some of that you can plan, you know, for an industrial park, and it might take 20 years before it really starts to hit that tipping point and people really come in, or the infrastructure that's needed to go with that. So the low growth scenario is what is called the safe harbor scenario, and that means that the Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD, that they go, yep, that seems pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Low growth, you're not really anticipating that too many people are moving into the area. It results in a slower job growth than what we have seen in the past 10 years. It assumes that industrial growth drops by 50%. A medium growth scenario, it would be that the industrial growth is consistent with the past 11-year average growth rate in Canby. The retail and government sector growth consistent with the Oregon Employment Department forecast for the Tri-County region. The service sector is assumed to approach the Oregon Employment Department forecasts for the region. And then it's the most likely growth scenario based on the Canby history and emerging trends. Then with the high growth scenario, it reflects aspirational objective aimed at optimizing family wage jobs and service jobs with prime industrial sites and enhanced visitation and amenities. Industrial sector assumed to add 300 more jobs than the medium scenario, with at least 1 to 3 large employers. Service sector job growth rate equates to the Oregon Employment Department forecast for the region with 460 more jobs than the medium growth scenario. And it requires added attractions and amenities, and it noted a hotel and sportsplex. And one of the questions that was asked, I think, by Mayor Hudson at the work session last time was what city staff thinks about these 3 options. And Don and I have spoken at length about this a couple of different times. And I guess I'll just speak for both of us, and then he can cut me off if he thinks I'm going in the wrong direction. But what we've learned, and I'm relatively new to this process, but that the medium growth scenario is something that would likely be accepted by DLCD. The medium growth scenario and the high growth scenario, it's not a huge jump. It's actually from low to medium is a big jump, and then from medium to high is much smaller. And so as Donna and I have been talking, you know, medium is something that we're both very comfortable with, but then when you start to factor into the concept of the buildable lands that we have and that the state recognizes are not actually accurate with things that might be in the pipeline but not actually have building permits pulled. We have both determined that a medium to high growth scenario, the thing that I learned and I thought was interesting is that I thought you had to just pick one category. It's either A, B, or C. And really it could be that we're more comfortable with something along these lines, medium to high growth. And I said to Don, what happens if we chose low or medium and in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we're out of land? Do you revisit? Is that something that you're able to do? And is that something, and the fact of the matter is, yes, it is absolutely something that you'd be able to do. It costs a lot of money to be able to do that, and a lot of time and energy, and probably more work sessions than anybody wants to have to deal with. But so I would say that your development services staff is most comfortable with a medium to high growth scenario at this time.
Jamie, you got it right. So I agree with you on all points. I think the other part is the committee thought the medium growth scenario and the medium to high again would factor in the fact that the state is not counting properties being consumed, as Jamie says, until a building permit has been issued. So that would factor in a medium to high recommendation, which I think is still defensible. And again, back to the point of doing this and the expense involved with this for the city, I think it's really important that we address this. The other thing is, I think dream big to some degree is important, and to look at things like sports complexes and those kinds of amenities that could be factored into that growth scenario. So I think that would be something, it may be some event center that could be attractive for the community and could bring in dollars. There was commentary about that during the Planning Commission on kind of a dance focus, and I don't have all the background on that, but something that brings in revenue for the city that could be an amenity, could be something that would be more possible, I think, with a medium high than just the medium rate. This all needs to be tempered based on what land is actually available on the perimeter of the city, and that's going to have to be tested through the comprehensive plan process. But I think it's better to not start out underestimating what the needs are, and the city can always scale that back as we go through this process. So that'd be the other piece of that I would recommend that we jointly recommend on this.
And it also, I think, going with a medium to high growth scenario also helps to address the question that we kind of started off with here tonight, which is, are those Portland State numbers correct? How do we know if they're incorrect? What has happened in the past and what will happen in the future? The one thing I don't love about planning is that, I think 1 + 1 should equal 2, and planning is 1 + 1, and then, all the algebra numbers or whatever gets in there of, unless this happens or that happens or this percentage or that percentage, and it makes it difficult to give a straightforward answer. But if things continue the way that we've seen in the last 2 to 5 years, and we were at the medium to high or just high or medium, we would at least be able to absorb more people moving into Canby, and also, more businesses trying to come to Canby than if we were to go with the lower scenario.
And Jamie, I thank you for that. I agree. I think we are more of that medium to high, projection piece. I would suspect that if we went strictly to the high growth scenario, that everything that we've been talking about so far, that we, from a policy standpoint, the numbers, et cetera, would have to support or be judged to be supportive of going with a high growth scenario, to then allocate or to then move into a conversation of that UGB expansion piece down the road. And what is that? Because they're not going to give us, we can't support the high growth scenario with the numbers. They're not going to approve this larger expansion of the UGB.
Right.
Is what
Right.
I'm hearing you say.
Yeah,
If we want to go high scenario, then our past history does not necessarily predicate this future
correct.
performance to get to that's
And the state could
scenario.
very well, for that reason and others, say, no, I'm sorry, we don't want to see that happen. And I pulled up the next slide, which talks about the land needs and the shortfall of the demand, and kind of that breakdown. And just because I wanted to pull up those numbers as far as I'm looking at the medium to high on the very end of what we would need in the future. The low growth scenario is a total of 85 acres. Medium is 444, and then high is 490. But the thing that I've heard, and Don can correct me if I'm wrong, in our conversations with the state, that low they feel very, very comfortable with. It's kind of just, yep, absolutely. Medium is something that you start to make the case for, and that at least they have indicated that they understand why Canby could and would make a case for the medium, but that high might be a little hard to digest. And so, it's like, how do you find that perfect sweet spot? You take the information and the best practices and hope that you're right. But I think that, for me, and now I'm deviating from the team a little bit, but Don and I have talked about this also, is just that for me, medium seems, again, it kind of passes the straight face test, where I'm like, it gives us land, it helps to answer that question of where we go, where we grow even, and it's not high, so that then it doesn't immediately, in my mind, raise a red flag for the state, where they say, wait, you just want to go high and you haven't shown that over time. It's like medium kind of is a nice spot if now we're taking into consideration that buildable lands, both residential and employment lands, and that there is land that is spoken for that's, not showing that it's spoken for quite yet. I think that's where that helps to push us, our argument, our case with the state to a medium to high growth.
And just to emphasize what Jamie is saying a little further is that the medium number there likely would be less, in our opinion, based on the fact that building permits would not be issued for several large warehouse projects that are committed, and that could be in the order of magnitude, I'm just rough guess, of about 80 acres. So that 437 might be 437 minus 80. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but this is the kind of math that we're kind of dealing with the state if those do not receive building permits. So again, I agree with what Jamie's saying, both from where I think need to go as a city to have opportunities, as well as to really factor in what we believe the true numbers are, even though the state has a formula that it's only based on building permits for committed lands.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, so now moving on to the economic policy discussion. In 2013, the city of Canby did a visioning process and adopted aspirational focus areas that are still relevant today. And when we say they're still relevant today, that is based off of the Economic Opportunity Analysis Committee coming together and reading through these items and agreeing that they're still relevant. So maintain quality of life for residents, quality job creation, improving the overall tax base, a vital and active downtown, Highway 99E corridor treatment, well-designed range of housing types, neighborhood safety and livability, and then improving pedestrian connections. And it's interesting because while the aspirational focuses are still relevant, a lot of work has been done in each one of those categories. And, it's something that, being someone who's been here now for 10 years, it's wonderful to be able to kind of sit back and think about each one of those themes and how we're still, they are still as relevant today as they were back then, but they're even more so important because really important work has been done in each one of those categories as it's moved forward. Additionally, there is a draft vision statement. And so this vision statement was based off of the vision, the mission and vision from that visioning process in 2013. So it basically, as a group, the economic opportunity analysis took a look at the former statement and found the ways that they wanted to update it. For example, one of the items that I remember was discussed at length was that it specifically spoke to small town keep a small town, community or a sense of small town in Canby. And one of the things I think that the consultants pointed out was the fact that based off of the numbers on how communities are quantified or called, we're not a small town anymore, we're a city. But what it was Todd Chase, what he kind of pressed on was, so we're not a small town, but you're not actually saying that. What were you trying to say? And it was the sense of community. So that's where we came up with this statement. Canby shall retain and enhance its unique sense of community and livable neighborhoods. Canby continues to be a great location for businesses to thrive and expand. Canby's downtown is inviting and safe with innovative businesses that meet the community's needs. Canby's employment centers attract a diverse mix of businesses that offer quality jobs and benefits. The Highway 99E corridor is designed as a safe and attractive gateway that invites visitors to explore Canby. The City of Canby proactively plans for and invests wisely in infrastructure and services that enable the community to manage growth in a sustainable manner. And so Todd really, pressed upon the committee to say, what is it that this statement meant in 2013, and really what are you trying to say, and does that still stand? And so that's where that draft statement came from. And then also we took a look at the objectives from that visioning statement, and went through them. Many of them were similar or are similar, still stand today. So the draft economic development objectives: enhance Canby's positive business environment, plan for industrial expansion areas east and north of Malino Road, retain and attract businesses that provide quality jobs with high levels of employment per acre, provide incentives for targeted job creation and major private investment, support expansion in health services, support workforce training and development, expand lodging options, fund roads and infrastructure using innovative techniques, support arts and visitation, including agra and bicycle tourism, attract downtown redevelopment with integrated mixed-use buildings, and then update design standards to provide incentives for building renovations.
Why don't you jump to the recommendations? Yeah. Next.
Is this you?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. And so staff worked to bring forward some recommendations, which would be to, and obviously this is a work session, so we can only get consensus. We're not asking for direction or for any voting or anything like that. But to move forward with housing strategies shown we said in bold, previously discussed, and those were those items that we pulled out in the blue and green boxes. Adopt the medium to high employment growth rate, adopt the community development vision statement, and the economic development objectives.
Thank you.
That's it. We're out of here. Great. No questions.
Again, I think like you said at the outset, this is a lot between the last meeting and this meeting. Again, just a lot of information to absorb, and it's a document and plan that I think you were alluding to earlier, Jamie. Just that will ebb and flow, expand and contract as we start to look at these things and look at where does the growth happen. So, I mean, for me, looking at the discussion recommendation piece, so for me, the growth scenario preferences is, there isn't much difference between the medium and the high growth scenarios. I think if we went back, we probably hit most of the medium targets that were laid out back in the day then compared to where we are now, and we did it, probably most of it here in the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, I'm comfortable with staying that medium to high, medium if with the numbers that support it, with a look to what could be a high growth piece. So, I mean, that's kind of my thoughts. Councilor Parker?
Yeah, I'm happy to go along with the staff recommendations, medium to high, and the other elements as well. It is profound, Brian, to take a look at the screen and to take a look at even the medium requirements over the next 20 years, and you add up the housing land and the industrial land, and we're looking at taking about 600 acres out of farm production. That's going to be the vote this council's going to have to make.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when I sit here and we have this conversation, and we look at like going north of Malino, east of Malino. That's a lot of leased farmland right now. Farmland that's in use, and there's housing already out that direction too. So yeah, it's a lot. Thoughts on the low, medium, high piece? Art, you have a thought?
Well, I appreciate the work that you've done here, because it's obvious you've done a lot of extensive study, and it's not an easy topic. I'm not real comfortable with the concept that the projections from Portland State are going to be accurate, and I think we're probably putting a little bit too much emphasis on the current rate of growth and the current size of household, because in 20 years it's going to look a lot different. And the problem is you don't know how different, whether it's smaller or bigger. But I think we do have to be prepared for that growth. And I think, to me, the medium to high option is probably the best. So I agree with you.
Question. Because we've done this a couple of times since I've been on the council, where we've rezoned some of the residential pieces, and sometimes I think I think development state-wise get reactionary to certain things. Like we build, or I'll use roads and infrastructure as an example. Oftentimes we will build faster than the infrastructure keeps up, and then it becomes this reactionary knee-jerk piece to, well, we got to put a road here, we got to fix this road and do this kind of thing. I guess my question is to Art's point, like if we're 15, this is a 20-year look into the future. At year 10, we're noticing a trend. Doesn't say that there is anything that we take something from R2 to R1, right? Like, is it, if we look at things down the road, is it better to set, larger residential lot sizes and then be able to constrict it, or start small and then expand to larger, depending on what's going, you know what I'm saying?
Your Honor, maybe I could answer that.
Sure.
So one of the things you do once you have a comprehensive plan and you give people a certain type of zoning, you give them the opportunities and the liabilities of that zoning. And then you might have subsequent buyers who buy it for the purposes that zoning allows. So you can always, as a legislative body, legislate and change the zoning, but it might cost you, because the owners have an interest in buying it for the reasons of the underlying zoning.
So then that would be on the onus of the owners to say, hey, we bought this land, we thought it was going to be this, we're seeing this trend, we want to change it to.
Yeah, and oftentimes what you'll have is the market, they'll come in and they'll ask for zone changes when they're developing, and then it's up to you at that point.
And that's where
which is healthier than just changing it, the underlying zoning, because then it can be seen as a taking sometimes.
Got it.
Sorry, just to add, and this small tangent here, the transportation system obviously is a critical functionality, and I heard part of that as a question. That'll be fully tested in this process as well in terms of what the land use scenarios are and addressing that from a transportation has to be addressed, and land use and transportation have to match and along with the levels of service that are forecasted. So just wanted to put that in there.
And I was going to say that with all of that, also, when we're doing the comprehensive plan update, one of the main things is going to be looking at the zoning overall. So not necessarily saying that we are going to change anything, but that everything will be taken a look at so that we can make sure that whether that's being as open as possible or as flexible as possible, or saying people don't really use this kind of zone, we see them change often, we want it to be this or something in between, that is something that we are actively working towards.
And just wanted to add real quick to that point, we absolutely see the need to have additional zones, and this exercise for the comprehensive plan will in fact address those issues based on what we believe are more market realities, and also to aspirationally look at things like affordable housing and those elements that would be part of that. So that's clearly going to be in part of this process, is to look at what zoning makes the most sense. I mean, especially for greenfield areas and areas being added into the city, very likely those will have different zones than perhaps we have now.
Will you, when you're looking at that, just as a favor to me, consider estate-sized lots, 1 acre lots? We don't have anything for that right now, and I would love to see if it's even feasible to have here, to build a development of 1 acre sized lots.
It becomes,
or half acre.
It becomes super challenging when we're tight on the land base to accommodate the population. And I hear what you're saying, and I know there's desire for that people have urban amenities, but they're kind of like also got space around them. And very familiar, but yeah.
Maybe with a high growth scenario, if that's the direction you wanted to go, there would be more land to be able to accommodate.
Some of that is restricted for employment, but
I tried really hard.
That all of a sudden became the angel and the devil on the shoulder.
This is one of the things that I'm really happy to have a partner like Don, because we work really well together, but then also obviously approach things in different ways. And so some of us have our head in the clouds, Don, and some of us have to just be the ones that pull you back to earth. So that's what I do.
I do agree with you, Don. I think when we look at the different striations within the residential piece, I think we need to do a little bit more layering of what does that look like. And I know that that's going to be something that the Planning Commission will have to also dive into and take a look at as well. Any other thoughts on the low, medium, high growth scenario preferences that seem to be?
Settle for half acre.
There were
It used to be a thing.
medium with a high on the horizon.
Sounds right.
Okay. And then the new Canby Community Development Mission Statements, which was that previous. I think the spirit of it is there. I think it encapsulates a lot of what we want Canby to be with these two items and moving forward. That's my opinion, but seeing maybe.
As a vision statement, I liked it. It was long. Like I don't think you put that on a poster. It's not catchy, but it encapsulates a lot of that.
No, a big piece of paper in color.
It'd have to be really big.
Yeah, it was a little choppy. I'm not here to wordsmith. I'm not the right guy to do that, but I think that I agree with you on that, Councilor Bangs, about the statements are there. I think the new economic development objectives, which are those 11 items we just talked about.
Based off the old objectives that were identified, yes.
Are there ones that we think the question there on the previous slide was which ones do we like them all? Do we want to retain all of them, change any of them?
I have a question on one.
Yeah.
I don't suppose we could bring that slide back up now that we just turned it off? Sorry, Melissa. It was a workforce training and development. It was the one I didn't really, I didn't understand. Number 6 rather.
And what was the question?
Well, I don't even know. I don't know what a role as our city is in that.
One of the things that we routinely do is we'll meet with like an industrial business who one of the things that has happened most recently is with the labor market as it is, and the last I heard, for every 2 jobs open, there's only 1 person looking for those jobs. One of the things that that we were able to do is tap into a network of workforce agencies and organizations like Clackamas Workforce Partnership, the state, Clackamas County, but the community college, I think that there was probably 7 or 8 in the room, and we pulled in the business so that they could express what they were going through, how they needed help, and then kind of almost start to partner them with the various offerings that were out there. Clackamas Workforce Partnerships, that they at least used to do training. If you were hiring, they would train and put the money into the training so that then you had staff that was ready to go when they started, as opposed to having a 3-month time wait. So they would actually take on the training, but then the business would be able to reap the benefits. One of the other things is it could be, I think it's the state that has various programs that help get people who have, different backgrounds and different, that have, might have some things in their history that aren't always the greatest on a resume, but they're working through a program. They have somebody who can, make sure that they are at the job when they say they're supposed to be at the job, and, actually showing up for work and all of those things. But it helps to then train someone who might have been incarcerated or might have, different convictions on their background. So that's what it means to support that. It's really, it could even be working with the little place called the Canby High School. We're having people students come from the Canby High School here for a job shadow in I think a week and a half with Sue Winter. And so it could be something as small as that, which is, that's not a lot of, obviously there's no financial part on our part, but that it helps to just start making connections and to connect those dots. And we have a whole host of partners that are eager and willing, and actually Clackamas Workforce Partnership, when we just met with this industrial business over the summer to address some of their needs, they, the business contacted me because I'm their local person. I contacted Clackamas Workforce Partnership because I know that this is something that they do, and they rallied the troops, and we hosted the meeting and brought everybody together and thought outside the box, and then a week or 2 later then went for a site visit so that all of those partners could see the building and how it worked, and learn a little bit more about the day-to-day operations in case there was something that's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And I believe that those relationships have continued, to this time.
Thank you. That answers it.
One of the questions I jotted down, and looking at number 3, retain and attract businesses that provide quality jobs with high levels of employment per acre. Is that a conversation that we need to revisit as a policy or as a, what's the word I'm looking for?
employees per acre.
Right, do we need, is that,
Like a decade.
is that something we need to revisit in terms of,
I would agree that that is something that the number of jobs per acre in our current code is low. And yeah, it's quite low. So I think part of that is a continued conversation on that. That will come before council in terms of a code amendment at some point, and your input on that will be invaluable because I think that does need to be looked at more specifically.
when we started the industrial park? And there were-
It was
thank you.
12, yeah.
Thank you for reading my
It's
mind.
low now. Like I said, we've had this discussion like 10 years ago
Okay.
because of
It was
warehouses.
12, and then Brian Brown changed that in 2019 because many or most of the developments in the industrial park that we were seeing were not bringing the high level of jobs, which was not to say that you couldn't build in the industrial park. It was just to say that you had to get a variance to be able to do that. And so Brian brought, I think there were 21 points that he brought through to the I should double check that. I do think it was 21 points to the city council. And one of those kind of tucked in there was reducing the number of jobs. And I did not agree with that reduction to 3 then, and I do not agree with it now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger discussion than tonight.
Oh, no, it's totally a bigger discussion than tonight, absolutely, but it was just something that's been on the
Yes.
brain of several of us, I think, up here, so. Any other comments or any additions to this,
Just on
Lester?
housing strategies, I may have missed this, but just your thoughts on housing strategies as well.
Are you talking about which one are you talking about?
The bold, yeah,
These, the strategies that we discussed.
Oh, sorry.
Is there, I mean, I guess maybe I can go through these again kind of slowly. I won't read through them, but if we could go page by page, and if there's something that someone doesn't like, or if, again, like I said, we pared down the list where there hadn't been either support or something implemented, but it's not to say that there aren't additional strategies out there that could be attached. We just wanted to make sure that we were highlighting for you this evening either what had been recently implemented or had support.
Yeah. Open up to the crew here. Councilor Parker?
I don't see inclusionary zoning on this page.
it's implied, I think, in the mixed-use zoning issues that it's mixed use is a broad term, but yes, we are supportive of that concept.
And what we could do is we could add including inclusionary zoning, or maybe not including, but with inclusionary zoning or something to make sure that we are being explicit in our strategies, as you know, in case Don and I got hit by a bus tomorrow, that we would not be, it wouldn't be lost, I guess.
Well, let's hope it doesn't happen.
Well, it's, yeah,
And
we'll
then
have to
hopefully not
really
carry
address
carriage.
things with cats if that happens.
Anything else in
Agree.
A that jumps out? Nope. Okay, A
No,
looks
I don't
good.
think so.
B,
Jane? I got it.
so reduce minimum lot sizes, PUDs, and then off-street parking requirements.
I don't like the reduction in lot sizes, but that's me. I know where you're trying.
No,
I don't like that.
Can you clarify a little bit about what you mean by PUDs? Because there's a couple different categories.
Absolutely. Plan unit developments, usually there's some commonality of open space with those, and there's some amenity, either private or public. And they're usually master plan communities. Kind of in exchange for that, there may be a variety of densities. There could be attached and detached product in a PUD. Really, there's just a lot more care and sensitivity to these. I think when you look at them, sometimes you see these around golf courses. They could be around an open space for a stream corridor. They could be just having common open space that's available in a condo setting or in individual fee ownership. Currently, the PUD process, we really don't have much in our code that really even encourages planned unit developments or a mix of uses. I think the challenge we have is we have different types of zoning, and there's a lot of battles fought over, well, their zoning is different than my zoning, and their product looks different than my product. The advantage of PUDs is the design standards will be the same throughout the entire project. That's a critical element. I think it's kind of lost sometimes because people, it's like, what is it that you don't like about it? Well, usually it's a design issue that people are concerned about. That doesn't look as good as my house. I mean, it's ironic, but Parade of Home products, when you look at those, you know, they're not always huge lots, but they build really nice homes on them. So that's part of that process, is to look at the design elements along with the amenities that go with those, not to give away anything in terms of saying, well, it's a PUD and therefore we have open space that's unusable. That is a non-starter, but something that does truly meet that intent and gives more of a planned community is something we would like to encourage, especially in areas that haven't developed yet. I mean, that would be the focus.
Yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant on B7 on lowering the off-street parking requirements. I don't think our off-street requirements are super high right now.
And
so I'd hate to add a bunch more cars to streets, especially as we begin to narrow our streets.
And I think that probably is, I mean, obviously we have the no parking requirement in the downtown area. I think maybe that would be, we would like to at least continue with that notion that, in the C1 zone, that would be something that that we continue with.
Yeah, I can see us possibly doing it in the commercial, but I'd like to maybe put a bullet point on there, to specify that so that we don't lower it in residential.
And maybe the other caveat is if they had caveats of having to be near transit, that would be one of those items that would be, if they're walkable areas that have good transit might be an exception, perhaps.
And I think one of the other reasons that was included was so that, and I could be wrong, but I think it was so that if Canby was to go in the way of doing something like cottage clusters, that then you weren't taking up space that would be, I believe that's what was one of the reasons that was included.
Well, maybe we could just add the words inappropriate zones to the end of that.
Inappropriate zones, okay.
Inappropriate zones.
Yeah.
And I think, part of this, again, will come back to you full on, so this would be like detailed out,
Okay.
Okay.
Just a clarification question. So in the packet we got, so like under B here, there's 11 items. Are all 11 of those
The bold ones are what made it to the.
No, I understand that. Okay, I just wanted to double check. So like B3 on the deck here is ADU development standards, but it's not up there. So that's something that we're not considering.
No, I don't think that it's that we're not considering it. It's just that we wanted to highlight the ones, because there's so many, and then obviously from this list there's even more, that we wanted to highlight the ones that had either had some work done on them already or had support through this process.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So we're not real excited about reduced minimum, or I'm hearing some, not excited about reducing lot sizes. Where do we sit currently for R1?
I think our maximum is 10,000 square feet.
It's 10,000 square feet.
Yeah,
for max, right?
I mean, you can currently average your lots, but essentially I think you can't go below 7. I mean, there are some thoughts here in terms of, and this kind of gets into the mixed use concept of floating density between zones. We were just in a meeting today for a project, the potential project that's in an area that has not developed yet. And they're looking at this in light of product that could be providing more affordable housing varieties, single family, detached, as well as probably attached product. They didn't give us the details exactly, but I think part of it is, again, I think we have to look outside of maybe what we've done historically and look to new ways of doing things. And what I mean by that is don't use the example of a project that you don't dislike, but rather could we come back with something that would define these and say, well, yeah, that would be okay in that circumstance in terms of how the density, with the mix of house. I don't think we have a good example of a mix of housing product in the city of Canby that has a variety of densities, and that's really kind of what we're missing, I think. Because, I think given some examples of this, I think it might be more appealing than just straight up like, I don't want to have shorter side yard setbacks between homes and smaller lots. There's a much bigger conversation around this than that.
All of these are much bigger conversations.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Like, put on a pot of coffee because these could be a while. Okay. Thoughts or adjustments or on these C items that are up there on the screen?
I think the SDCs is a bigger conversation than tonight as well.
Sure, but
But
again, I think
it should be on there, yeah.
Yeah. When we look at tools in our toolbox, is there a modification to that can be looked at? Any other? We're good. Head nods if we're good.
Good start.
Okay. I guess D, you didn't have anything in D, but then moving into E and F.
G, E.
Really was the nonprofit low-income rental housing exemption. Again, another tool in the toolbox, right?
Pardon?
Another tool in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And then F1 and 2 were kind of already working on those things.
Already kind of implemented, yeah.
Okay. And then category Z.
Remind me what the education for property owners and developers piece is. What would our role be in education of the?
I think a good example, it's part of the comprehensive plan piece. We're going to continue with that. And I think part of that is what is the housing need? What is the employment needs in the community? How do we get people engaged in that conversation to say kind of what is it you like and what is it you dislike, and then start to give people opportunities to look at different ways of accommodating housing, et cetera. Not prescriptive at all, but just I think that's part of that conversation. I'm not sure if the local paper is carrying a lot of that, on a weekly basis or whatever. So the average citizen, I think, has very little information on planning. It's not a real hot topic unless there's a development in your area. People are not talking about planning at parties. This is more about getting the word out and to the high schools, for example. I think education, I would love to see the high school students engaged in this comprehensive plan process where, that gets the parents involved because the kids are involved. And what do you think about the scenarios of our community? What should they be? What should they not be? Where should things go? And having, that's really part of that education piece is,
I also think that was hopefully to address, if lot sizes or zoning requirements have changed, something like a cottage cluster, I don't believe is allowed the way that the zoning is written right now. If that were to change, but all of the developers who are going to develop in the next 20 years have only developed in Canby over the last 20 years, then they just continue to do more of the same. And we then look like a bigger, more of the same
and that's
community.
I love that, and I think part of that is getting the input from developers on what would work and what is the win-win, where is that cross-section between what we want as a city and what they can provide. I think that's a huge part of this discussion as well, to Jamie's point, is, because they obviously need to be part of the private sector needs to be part of this conversation as well, which is what category of strategies would work to incentivize this, that gives the ability for you to change your mindset, which is, like, I can only build this type of home here, and that's, It's like, well, what about this? They do it in other communities. And so those are and they say, well, we can't because of this. And that's part of that conversation.
Any changes or thoughts on category Z? Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time. We really appreciate you having us back to listen more about our continued efforts. And, as Don outlined in the beginning, there are some upcoming meetings, that will be in early 2023. When we have the open house date, we'll make sure that everybody has that so that you guys can attend, but then also that you can help spread the word because you all have your various families, friends, groups, all of those different segments. And then, many of these items will be coming back before you for adoption. So thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you guys. Great work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to end our work session here and take a quick 5-minute break for us to stretch legs and do what we need to do. And we'll get ready for the city council meeting here in the next couple of minutes. Thank you. Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2022 regular city council meeting, and thank you for allowing us to take a quick break on our extended work session this evening. If you please stand for the invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this great community. I thank you for the leaders that are here on this dais. I pray for our men and women in service to our country and our state and our city. Please keep them safe and bring them home safely to their families. I pray for so many things. But with elections coming up, we know that our leaders are predetermined by you, and there is a plan for that. And we ask for calmness, we ask for camaraderie, we ask for partnership in whoever is put into those positions of leadership in our city, in our county, our state, and in our country. I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a proclamation for Small Business Saturday. This proclamation is declaring that the Saturday after Thanksgiving, November 26th of 2022, as Small Business Saturday. Whereas the city of Canby celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. Whereas according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 32.5 million small businesses in the United States. Small businesses represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees. Small businesses are responsible for 62% of the net new jobs created since 1995. And small businesses employ 46.8% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. Whereas 79% of consumers understand the importance of supporting the small businesses in their community on Small Business Saturday, 70% report the day makes them want to encourage others to shop small, independently owned retailers, and 66% support that the day makes them want to shop small all year long. Whereas 58% of the shoppers reported they shopped online with a small business, and 54% reported they dined or ordered takeout from a small restaurant, bar, or cafe on Small Business Saturday in 2021. Whereas the city of Canby supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday, now therefore I, Mayor Hodson, Mayor of the City of Canby, hereby proclaim November 26, 2022 as Small Business Saturday, and strongly urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Given unto my hand the second day of November 2022 in the city of Canby, Oregon. And I've got Jamie Stickle here with the Economic Development Team and members of the Chamber of Commerce. If you guys want to come on up.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We'll give that to you.
Great.
Thank you.
And we're gonna have Jerry Nelzine take a photo for us with you.
Oh, okay.
Please don't run away too quickly. Here.
Stand sideways.
That was, I don't know why I laughed so hard. And then can I just, may I just
Yes,
say?
anyone can, please.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, Mayor Hodson. And again, Jamie Stickle with the Economic Development Department. And we think that it's really important to obviously have the declaration of Small Business Saturday, and really walk the walk and not just talk the talk. We invited the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors here and staff because while our missions might be different, at the end of the day, really our focus is on supporting our local businesses, our small businesses here in Canby. And it is one of the things that I like the most about this proclamation is that it talks about that the hope is that this continues all year long. People, all of us, get to shop with our paychecks and determine where that money goes. And we might not think that it always matters where we spend our money. And then if you start to talk to a small business and you start to learn more about the business itself, the operators behind that business, the families behind those operators, every single dollar, every single penny really does make a huge impact in this community. And so it's important to honor Small Business Saturday. The city is a neighborhood champion, which is part of the Small Business Saturday work, where they send marketing materials and different items to hand out during the Small Business Saturday event. And Tyler has done that. We did that again, or we did that last year as well, is what I'm trying to say. But that it's really, really important. And so I just wanted to thank you for allowing us this opportunity and thank the Chamber of Commerce for all they do to support our small businesses and also for coming here this evening. But that I would urge people year-round, this holiday season, every single Saturday, whatever it might be, if you have an extra dollar to spend and you can spend it in a small business, I'd love that small business to be here in Canby. If you have to do it in New Jersey or in Mexico or wherever you're traveling, okay, that's fine too. But if you have an extra dollar, save it and spend it in Canby at a local business. It really does go a long way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie. Diane, or Chief, did you want to?
Mayor, Council, thank you. I'm President of the Canby Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to thank the city, thank what Jamie does and what Tyler does for our small business community. It's tremendous. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to be downtown for trick or treat, but we had record amount of kids down there. And thank you to Tyler for a job well done in organizing that, as well as doing things like the Scarecrow contest that's sponsored by DreamWorks. They do a wonderful job as well. Well, it's so cool just to see people walking around looking at those scarecrows because they do stop in. It does make a big difference for our businesses downtown. So thank you very much for the proclamation.
Thank you, sir. Glad to do it. Great. Mr. Archer, some new staff introductions.
Thank you, Mayor Hodson. Tonight I am pleased to introduce to you two new staff members, both of whom are joining our library team. The first is Amber Quinn, and Amber is in the back here. Amber has been hired as a library manager. She began on October 17th. She comes to us from Portland Community College, where she worked as a library supervisor for 9 years. Prior to that, she worked at the Tualatin Public Library. Amber has over 16 years of library experience that she brings to the City of Canby's library. She enjoys hiking, camping, and listening to cozy mysteries on audiobook. We are very pleased to have Amber joining our Canby Library team. Next is Philip Yoakum. Philip's also back that way. Philip is our new children's librarian. He began on October 25th, so he's even newer than Amber, who is also very new. Philip received his Master's of Arts in Library and Information Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, with a focus on children and youth services and digital librarianship, so very tied into being a children's librarian. Philip enjoys providing fun and engaging events for children, and he absolutely adores the author and illustrator John Clausen. His favorite book by him is I Want My Hat Back. I'm going to have to look into that one. He has about 10 years of experience in libraries with children and teens focused settings. He really looks forward to developing our Canby Library's children's programming and community partnerships in his new role as our children's librarian. In his free time, he enjoys playing Lego with his son, practicing Japanese through music and movies, and cooking for his family. Welcome, Philip.
Great.
Those are our two introductions.
Scott, thank you for the introductions. Amber and Philip, before you run out the back door. I know. Wow, that was. They're faster than the police officers. As excited as we are to have you joining our team, thank you for choosing Canby to work and continue your career. So welcome to the city of Canby, and I'm sure you'll see us in the library frequently. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Next on the agenda this evening is an update on the Clackamas 800, or the radio group, or the C800, and that's Chief Tro this evening. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to have Jim Davis now. He doesn't have to join. So Scott asked me to give you an update on the Clackamas C800 radio project. So I want to give you a little background about C800 and what it is first. So C800 is an ORS 190 intergovernmental agency that was created back in 1990. And our main goal is to operate the voice and data communication system for emergency responders in all of Clackamas County. It consists of 19 public safety agencies, which consist of all the police and fire agencies in Clackamas County, and those member agencies consist of the board. So Chief Davis is on the board. Luckily, I was voted chair of the board this year, and so it's been a very busy year for us, as you'll see as I give the update. We also have more than 20 user agencies that use the system. So we have more than 2,600 first responders that are active in the system, and our service area is about 1,879 square miles, and we serve a population of over 400,000. So a little bit about the bond background. So in 2016, voters approved a $59 million bond to upgrade our existing radio system that was antiquated and needed upgrading. It passed with great success at 71%. Included in the bond was to add 12 additional communication towers and upgrade 6 existing towers. So the bond, again, was in 2016. We're with the project, about 95% complete. We need to complete last 3 towers, which are up the Malala River corridor and one in Mount Hood. 2 of the towers are nearly complete and will be completed this year. We have 1 tower left that will be up on Ski Bowl, and that one will be completed in the spring, early summer of next year. Earlier this year, back in April, and I think some of you gotten some update on this, but back in April, our project manager at the time notified the board there was about a $2.6 million shortfall to complete this project. So the board right away established a work group to find out, what went wrong and to determine the cost overruns. We reviewed all contracts and where we're at, and we actually determined that the shortfall was closer to $4.4 million to complete the project from what the voters approved. So there were a lot of contributing factors for the shortfall. There was some lack of financial oversight in the project, some project mismanagement. COVID hit, which slowed things down. There were supply chain issues, delays from getting permits from the U.S. Forest Service. There were a lot of unanticipated costs. One of the roads to get to a brand new tower, to get power up to it, there were a lot more rocks. So they had to drill more, and it was significantly higher than the original estimate. And inflation, right? These were 2016 estimates when we did this, and inflation hit, so definitely costs more. There was also the 2020 Riverside fire and the 2021 ice storm. So that added cost, there was required cleanup, removal of debris, damage to facilities. After the fire, U.S. Forest Service went in there and did a lot of tree clearing. It damaged actually some of the power and some of the vaults that went to some of the towers, so that was additional expenses. So some of the things that the board has done is we build agencies for radios and fire station alerting systems that we were hoping that with some extra money of the bond would pay for. So anybody who did not, so the bond paid for some of the radios for all the agencies. There were some extra radios that we were hoping that the bond would pay, but now being over budget, they're not going to pay for it. So we build agencies for those extra radios. The project manager's contract was not renewed, and we're not contracted by Washington County Communications. Project is now back on track. We hope to get everything completed by the summer of 2023. We pursued all types of other fundings, from grants to emergency funding from the state, but we did not have any luck. Recently, about a couple weeks ago, Clackamas County Board of Commissioners approved $2 million of ARPA funds towards the shortfall, which we're very grateful. So that cuts our shortfall nearly in half. A couple other things that we have lined up is we are in communication with Columbia County 911 to buy some of our surplus equipment. We think we're estimating, depending on how much they buy, is about $600,000 to $1 million in equipment to sell to them. We're also still pursuing some other funding. But in the end, member agencies are responsible to cover this shortfall. And billing for this, we'll have a better idea if we get some grants and sell the equipment. But billing will begin in the spring of 2023 for any outstanding costs. So the city of Canby's estimated cost, depending on the sale of equipment and some other grants, will probably be around $70,000 to $100,000. And I think, Chief, if I'm not mistaken, yours is going to be between $100,000 and $130,000 for their shortfall. So that's basically it, an overview of that. If you have any questions, I'd be willing to answer them.
And then if I could, before you ask any questions, if you have any, thank you, Chief Tro, for helping to explain that. I just wanted to make sure that the council was fully up to speed on this, or just a lot of this has been kind of recent, so we have more clarity. We've been kind of waiting for that, and that's why I thought this was good timing. Plus tonight there's like 3 police department items, so it's Canby PD night apparently on our agenda. But what I wanted to also add to what Chief Tro, what the information he gave you is regarding the budgetary issue. This bill may come due in the current fiscal year. We did not budget for this because back in our budgeting for this current fiscal year, we didn't know what we were looking at. It would have been just a very wild guess, so we decided to just kind of wait and see. It may carry over into next budget year, so we might kind of see how that goes. But we are prepared to bring budget solutions forward for this. So we're not just bringing you a problem. It's a one-time expense. I'm confident that we'll be able to cover that. Chief mentioned that the county actually spent about $2 million of their ARPA funds. We do have ARPA funds available. That could be one of our potential budget solutions. We met, Chief and I met with our finance director yesterday just to kind of reconfirm our uses of those funds, and Eric, our finance director, is very up to speed on the ARPA rules. We're confident that that's an appropriate use if we would want to do that. We also have contingencies built into our budget, so if it came due this year and we needed to pay that, we would be fine. So just so you know, there's it's not a budgetary issue. I mean, we'd prefer not to have this have happen, but it is what it is, and we're on the hook for our part of it as one of the partner agencies. So we're prepared to deal with the budget part of it. Just want to let you know that. And I guess the last thing is I just want to also acknowledge George mentioned that he's the chair of this group right now. He became the chair, and then shortly thereafter they figured out they had this problem. But he has been, I know, doing a tremendous job of leading that effort, advocating for the group, but also on behalf of Canby. And so it's been nice that kind of the timing, as much as maybe George wishes he didn't have to be the chair at this time, because they're working their way through perhaps one of your more challenging issues you've had to deal with. But George has done a really great job with his leadership on that committee. So I thank him for that.
All right.
Scott, thanks for at least letting us know that there's a potential solution, because no, it was not budgeted in this year for that. I won't speak for the rest of council. I don't like surprises like that. I know that this was discussed at the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, that this project was hitting some wonkiness, but this was a while ago. So to come and have these kind of numbers put to it is very disheartening. This was poorly executed for a safety standpoint that was been long overdue to get repaired and replaced to begin with. I know you're just the messenger, George, and I'm sorry about that.
I'm new to the board, period.
No, I get it. We can be sure to.
Sorry, George.
Be sure to send Brett that thank you card for that.
Chief Davis has been a longtime member of the board now.
So I'm sure he's been holding your hand through this.
This was a
thing.
surprise to all the board members.
Well, I gather that, but this is, I mean, a $4 million oopsie. I just think that's just. So you being the messenger, who do we go after? Because somebody needs to hear about this. I don't know if it's a county commissioner.
It's the board's responsibility to cover the cost of this, and that's unfortunate.
Well,
Thank
there
goodness there's the
were a
rainy
lot
day
of
fund.
factors here too.
I get it.
I mean, the mismanagement part is disappointing, but I mean, fire, ice, inflation, we couldn't have predicted that in
All those
2016.
things really
so-
contributed to it. Yeah.
I get it. It's the.
But the mismanagement part is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Like I said, good thing we have a rainy day. We've been saving for not these kinds of things, but it's there.
Yeah.
Well, lucky for you, we're not going to shoot the messenger.
Thanks. That's why I brought back up.
Oh, is that why they're here? Okay.
I notice they're flanking the door.
I know, right? Make sure Chief gets out safe.
Tactical positioning. So, well, I mean, I'm sure that every jurisdiction is not real happy about this and is voicing these concerns to their respective board members. And so, please extend my equal dissatisfaction with the board as well. So, okay, I guess we'll come back to figure that out later.
This is just for information, and we'll continue to keep you updated, and as more information becomes available, and when there's more certainty about things, we'll bring forward the appropriate messaging and potential action items at that time.
Great. So
And the board hopes to work on reducing those as much as we can. So.
Awesome.
So a bake sale?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Well, good. I'll look forward to getting upset about this again in the future. So
It'd be
thanks.
kind of funny to have you all sold donuts.
So George, you don't need to go far because item number 5 is you as well.
Yes.
A presentation of accreditation award to the Canby Police Department from Scott Hayes, the Executive Director of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance.
I think he's going to be on Zoom.
Okay.
Maybe.
He's there. There he is.
Mr. Hayes, are you there?
Here we go. Just wanted to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yes. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, excellent. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and members of the community. I'm Scott Hayes, as introduced, Executive Director of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council and present the Canby Police Department with its first award of accreditation under the leadership of Chief Trill. So let me explain why accreditation. Law enforcement is experiencing a changing society with increased demands of police accountability and transparency. In the past, our profession has face these challenges and work with our communities to address our concerns. Accreditation is one step towards building community trust and legitimacy of our profession. The Oregon State Alliance was formed under the direction of the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, the Oregon Association Chiefs of Police, and the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. We provide accreditation services for 85 law enforcement and communication centers in the state of Oregon and in Alaska. Accreditation goals are straightforward. They are to support continued improvement of law enforcement services, establish best practice through professional standards, to establish agency accountability and transparency, and to enhance the management of operations. This is really a phenomenal step for any agency to be evaluated by an outside independent organization and have its policies and procedures and practices scrutinized. There are 106 law enforcement standards the agency must adhere to. These standards are based on best practice nationally and through changes in Oregon law. In addition to these standards, the agency must also show proof of compliance that the agency is following policy and best practices. Once an agency is accredited, they are reaccredited every 3 years. I know a lot of staff members are involved in this process, but I would also like to recognize Captain Doug Kitzmiller as the agency's accreditation manager. It takes a considerable amount of time and very close attention to detail to identify policies that address each of our standards and then provide proof of compliance that the agency is actually adhering to those standards. Captain Kitzmiller worked very closely with our assessors throughout the process and did a phenomenal job in preparing the agency for its review. Again, this is not an easy task, and it can take a considerable amount of time and effort to do this. And it's a monumental step for the agency. So Chief Cho, on behalf of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance and its board of directors, I would like to present you with your first award of accreditation. Congratulations.
Mayor and Council, I have been asked from one Scott to another. Mr. Hayes was not able to be here in person, and I was asked to present this to our police department leadership team. So I'm going to do that in place of Scott being here in person. So I'll give it to Chief, and you can give it to whoever you want. Middle here.
Pretend like you are happy. There you go. Thank you.
Happy done.
So a couple things I would just like to add. Thank you, Scott Hayes, for presenting this award. When I became chief, one of my top priorities was to get accredited by the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. And one of the things that I really like is not only, like Scott said, you have to have policies and procedure in place that are best practice and follow the law and regulations, but it's showing proofs that you're actually following those. And that's one thing with accreditation. You have to show those proofs, and it's a lot of work to gather that stuff for the accreditation process. So I gotta say again, Sergeant Kitzmiller, he took on this assignment. He did a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, and without him, we wouldn't be here today receiving this. So thank you, Captain Kitzmiller.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, George. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you joining us tonight and recognizing our police department. So thank you very much.
More than welcome, sir.
All right. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda this evening is citizen input and community announcements. So this is an opportunity for audience members to address the city council on items not on the agenda. If you are attending in person, please fill out a yellow card that's back there on the podium and make sure that our city recorder gets it, and then she will pass it on over to me. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff and the city council will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizen input before the meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. If you'd like to speak virtually, please email or call the deputy city recorder by 4:30 p.m. on the date of the city council meetings with your name, the topic you'd like to speak on, and your contact information. Once your information is received, you will be sent instructions to speak. I think we've got a couple of people on. Do we have people on Zoom, Melissa?
Do it for number 9 though.
Okay, but they're wanting to speak for item 9 later down the road. Okay. So the only other yellow card I have for a non-agenda item is Jason Patton regarding the Planning Commission.
Yes. It's been a while since I've been in person in here. I've been doing a lot of travel. So just as a Planning Commission update, I just wanted to let you know I had a meeting with Don, and we are actively looking at the list of items that we received from the mayor some time ago. Some of them have been checked off the list. Some of them are ones that we don't think are either have been addressed, or a lot of them are ones that will be addressed once we get done with all of these studies and stuff that we're doing, and then doing the major code sort of refresh and update. So I was pushing Don for us to do an actual, like, here's what we've checked off the list and here's what we have not. And he recommended, and I agreed, that we should hold off for another 3 years before we bring that list back to you and say, ta-da, all the stuff is checked off. So just so you know, it's actively being worked on, and we're doing that. Also, we do have one position open on the Planning Commission. Don and I don't know if you've noticed my efforts online, but Don and I are actively working to try and get that position filled, so we don't run afoul of any quorum things should that come up here during the holidays. So as far as a Planning Commission update, that's what we have. Any questions? Okay.
Oh, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. That is all that I have in yellow cards for community. The rest are, citizen input. The rest are for later in the agenda. So we will move into item number 7, which is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda that includes the minutes of the August 31st, 2022 special called city council meeting and the appointment of Kara Hawkins to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for a term expiring June 30th, 2024.
I'll second.
So the motion has been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Varwig to approve the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the August 31st, 2022 special called city council minutes, and then appointment of Kara Hawkins to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for a term expiring June 30th of 2024. Any comments or discussion? Councilor Parker?
Yeah, I was taking a look at what we've got going on in the next couple of years in terms of the Parks Committee and review of the consultant reports that are going to be coming in, and we're going to need somebody who's good at asking questions. And I personally know how tough she can be with her questions, so I think Kara would be an excellent person on that commission.
Great, thank you, Craig. Yeah, so a little bit about that. So myself and Park Chair Barry Johnson, and then our staff liaison Ryan Potter conducted interviews. We did have 2 applicants, and the decision was to go with Kara just because of her level of engagement over the last couple of years with the parks piece and whatnot. And I know she's been very passionate about a couple of the projects and whatnot, and so she's been following a lot of things regarding parks for a number of years. So we felt that she was going to be a good fit. The other applicant was equally excited about parks as well, and so we just felt that Kara was going to bring the level of prudence to the Parks Board. So Kara, we appreciate it. Any other discussion on the consent agenda or questions? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0.
Thank you, Kara.
Moving into item number 8, ordinances. The first one is to consider ordinance number 1586, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into an employment contract between the city of Canby and Dave Connor. Second reading. Mr. Archer.
Mr. Mayor, second reading, we gave you a full report last meeting, so unless you have any questions, we don't have any new information for you.
So just a refresher for those of you that are didn't tune in to the last meeting and are here in the audience. So Dave Connor works in our wastewater treatment plant, and we are looking to do a hire back situation, so a contract help with his position, so he'll stay on board, and then in the time that he's still here, we'll train and mentor a couple of other replacements for when the time comes and he fully decides to retire. So he's been great in that capacity there at the Public Works and part of that team down there in that leadership. So this is a good situation for us and for him to continue in this capacity.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I move to adopt ordinance 1586, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into an employment contract between the city of Canby and Dave Connor.
Second. Give it to her this one.
Motion has been made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Marine to approve ordinance number 1586, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into an employment contract between the city of Canby and Dave Connor. Any other discussion or comment? All those in favor?
Aye. Oh, sorry, roll call.
Oh, dang it.
I was following your lead,
I
though.
know, thanks, that's good. We're both wrong.
Councilor Baines.
Aye.
Council President Hensley.
Aye.
Councilor Marine.
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Councilor Barwick.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
The rest of first meetings.
Thanks, Council President Hensley. Item 8B is consider ordinance number 1587, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to approve an annual agreement with Microsoft and one-time migration project with Converge One Inc. for Microsoft Office 360 software.
Thank you again, Mayor Hodson. The action before you is we're asking for approval of expenditures so that we can upgrade and update our IT systems. We are proposing, our IT department has made this recommendation and we've sought bids, and we're bringing this before you, proposing to move, or I should say migrate, our current Exchange mail server and Microsoft Office productivity software, so basically all of our kind of operating systems, from an on-premise server to a cloud-based server. It's Microsoft Office 360. By doing so, it allows us to take advantage of improvements in our security of our IT system, our efficiencies, availability of products, maintenance resources, and lots of additional improvements and features. So essentially, and this is a product that is highly utilized in the governmental sector, and a lot of apparently a lot of governmental agencies have either gone to this or are moving in this direction. And again, it runs entirely in the cloud. It migrates our platform. It does a lot of great things, and it also reduces some of our ongoing costs, and it just essentially makes us much more efficient and modern in this setting. The expenditure is actually two components. One component is a one-time migration fee, so that'll just be a one-time thing to do the full migration. The second part of the fee is our our annual maintenance contract, which would be an ongoing cost each year. So this would be for that first year of that. And so I would also note that Paul Waterman, our IT systems administrator, is here this evening to help answer any questions should you have any, and we're asking for your approval.
Great, thank you. Councilor Parker.
I'm ready to make a motion, just to get it on the table, and then I do have a comment to make after that. I move to pass ordinance 1587, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to approve an annual agreement with Microsoft and a one-time migration project with Converge One for Microsoft Office 365 software for the city of Canby to come up for a second reading on November 16, 2022.
Perfect. The motion's been made by Councilor Parker and seconded by Councilor Bangs to approve ordinance number 1587, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to approve an annual agreement with Microsoft and one-time migration project with Converge One for Microsoft Office 365 software for the city of Canby to come up for a second reading on November 16th, 2022. Discussion, comments? Councilor Parker.
Well, I don't know anything about IT, but I know something about auditing IT. When I was at the Audits Division, we did a number of them, including the Employment Department and DMV. And I came away with three things about software systems, that they're always going to cost more than you think. They're always going to do less than you want, and you're going to need to replace them earlier than you think. So, for heaven's sakes, if this isn't working, follow the chief's lead and come back here and ask for more money, because technology is changing so fast and we need it so much. Do not hesitate if things don't work out the way we want them to.
Well, it'll be nice to get off of Microsoft 97, so that'll be good. Okay, 2000, so, sorry. Yes, Councilor Barwick.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Paul, I'm going to make you talk in front of people into a microphone at the table. So I have to come up. Can you give us a rundown on any security risks that we might have with this, or does this give us better security? And what is the potential for hacking our servers and systems with it being in the cloud? And then does it change our email access again? Because I know we changed that just a few years ago.
So it does not change access to your email. It improves security. Currently, if you all know multi-factor authentication, so when you get the little code saying, hey, is this really you? Right now, when you log into your email on the web, et cetera, you don't get that. And it's not available through our on-premise Exchange servers. With the 365, that will become part of that, so it will change how you access it. It will prompt you more to say, are you who you say you are? So you will see that when that changes. The availability is a big thing when there's issues or like a natural disaster, fire, et cetera. If there's any problems with the access to this building, then the city is without email. So being in the cloud, as long as you have internet connectivity, if there's anything that happens here locally in town, we will all have access and instant communication with each other continually. So that's a huge improvement as well.
So for the two-factor authentication, which, by the way, drives me nuts because I can never remember different codes, we'll be able to do facial recognition with it for the two-factor, and also, or will I have to pick crosswalks or streetlights and, say I'm not a robot?
No, you actually do a phone call or a voicemail, or you could do an app. So you can install like the Microsoft Authenticator app, and it'll just once you're already registered, it'll say, are you trying to log in? You just hit yes, and then you're done.
Got it. The big concern for me is just our security and
it actually the 365, there is a governmental 365, so it is in a more secured data center only within the U.S. and it meets all of the FBI, all the agencies' security requirements for that data to be in those data centers.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yes, Art.
So does this mean that we won't be using on-site servers at all? Everything will be remote?
Just for the email.
Just for the email, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Without any further discussion, all those in favor of the motion on the table?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0. Next item is 8C, considering ordinance number 1588, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Axon Enterprises in the amount of $185,714.70 for the purchase of body-worn cameras.
Mr. Mayor, as I said earlier, it's the Chief Tro and Canby PD show tonight, so I'm going to invite Chief back up to give you a report about this.
Hello again. So yes, the ordinance in front of you is to execute a contract with Axon Enterprises for purchase of body-worn cameras, equipment, and software. As many of you know, we've had in-car video cameras for about 10 years in our vehicles. So we would like to enhance the use of cameras by issuing every officer body-worn camera. If approved, once implemented, so officers will be required to record encounters beginning with when the officer develops reasonable suspicion or probable cause on a suspect or subject when a violation or crime has occurred. So we have researched several companies that make body-worn cameras, and the best one that fits our needs and it has a lot of great features is the Axon Enterprises body-worn camera. So this is a 5-year contract for a total of $185,714.70. The first year of implementation is $58,276.30. And then the following years of years 2 to 5 will cost about $31,859.60. So we did budget in our budget $50,000 for this first year implementation. You can see that's a little short of the $58,000, but we were able to apply and receive a grant from City County Insurances for $10,000 to cover that $8,000 cost. So this 5-year cost includes all the equipment you need, the software, the evidence storage, the redaction software, warranty, and also training to implement the cameras. There's a lot of cool features on this system. One of them that I'm just going to point out is called the Citizen for Communities. It's really nice. So it's where citizens can send us security videos directly through a link through Axon. So for instance, so somebody has a car broken into in their driveway and they have video, surveillance video of the act. So we send them a link. They send us the video through this link and it goes right to the case file. So it's a really slick system. I respectfully request that you approve this ordinance to purchase these body-worn cameras.
George, how quickly will this be going into effect?
So once we sign the contract, it takes about 2 months to receive the body-worn cameras and then probably another month or 2 of implementation and training.
So
probably about 4 or 5 months.
Okay, so what is that going to mean in terms of, the recordings, redaction, going through all that? What is it?
It's all automatic. So when the officer is done with the shift, he puts it on a cradle, and it all automatically downloads to the cloud. It goes to a case file, right, with that case number, and so it stays. And there's different retention rates for all those videos. But it's a really slick system. And then this one also comes with a redaction software, which is the best redaction software that we've seen for any body-worn cameras. So that's something that our evidence tech, so when we get public records requests for a video, Carrie Ennis, our evidence tech, would go in there and actually redact the video if it's a public record request.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's mostly the faces of children, just so you guys can picture what.
We get black smudgy.
You get like those pixelated faces.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Okay. I only have one question. Go ahead.
Councilman Reed?
So Chief, I'm ignorant on this stuff, so help me. The officer is required to manually turn on the camera when they encounter a situation that should be recorded.
Yes, so they could turn it on at any time, but the requirement will be when they develop a probable cause or reasonable suspicion of a violation of a crime occurring. So if they contact somebody for a traffic violation, they'll have to turn it on. Okay. If they contact somebody on an assault or any theft or something, they'll turn it on before contacting them, and that will be recorded throughout their contact with this person.
Do you anticipate any challenges with human error? for the officers forgetting to turn the
I mean,
camera on.
it could be, you know, especially in a stressful situation or something
Yeah.
like that, there's a chance. But the more we use it, the more we'll, you know, get used to doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Councilor Marine, if I could supplement that, the cool thing is if everybody's wearing them, you might have 5 videos.
Yeah.
You know, so one guy might be wrestling somebody and everybody else is clicking theirs on, right? But the cool thing about this sort of policy is a lot of people also don't like the idea that there could be multiple cameras out in society just recording everything that everybody does. We would have 3 on this whole time if you didn't allow them not to turn them on when there isn't some sort of crime in progress. So it's a nice balance.
And one of the things, we actually let the person know that when the camera is turned on, they're being recorded. So they're advised of that.
Is there a light or something that
I think there is a
acknowledges-
light that turns on. You can dim it as far as like if it's a tactical type of situation or something like that. But there is, I think, that's a light that comes on these.
Councilor Banks?
Are the procedures different for the SRO? Or are they the same?
No, they would be the same, actually, but that's a good question because there's sometimes with the schools and stuff, but I have already talked to actually the superintendent, Aaron Downs, about this, but it would be the same. If we're contacting someone on a crime or a violation, the law requires for us to turn them on. Yeah.
But that'd fall under the redacted thing if it was
Yes,
public
so
record.
if it goes out, yeah, it'll be redacted. Of course.
Interesting.
There's more restrictions on releasing anything related to juveniles. So.
Yeah, he goes first.
What about the behavioral health officer? Is he going to wear one, or will he be recorded while, you know, he's engaging with somebody?
Yeah, no, he will not be issued a body-worn camera, but if he's with a police officer and engaging somebody, that officer will have his on. Yeah.
That's a great question.
I'm assuming this is already budgeted.
Yes, the first year is budgeted, and then the years 2 to 5 will budget in future years, budget years.
Okay, well then, in that case, Mr. Mayor, I move to pass ordinance 1588, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract with Accent Enterprises in the amount of $185,714.70 for the purchase of body-worn cameras, equipment, software, and services to go to a second reading November 16th, 2022.
Second.
Motion's been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Barway to approve ordinance 1588, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract with Axon Enterprises in the amount of $185,714.70 for the purchase of body-worn cameras, equipment, software, and services to a second reading on November 16th, 2022. Any other discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Mayor Hudson, if I may, thank you for approving that. And while Chief is here, on a related topic, just kind of laying the groundwork for something that'll be coming down the pipeline that's very much related to this, I'm going to ask George to kind of give you just a quick heads up on some integrated systems with our in-car cameras that he referred to that I think are about 10 years old at this point. And
Yes.
so we're going to be looking to upgrade those as well, but there's a connection to this body cam.
Yeah, so I'm hoping in the next couple council meetings that I'll be coming in front of you again requesting another contract to purchase new in-car video cameras. As Councilor Parker said, that with IT stuff, it gets old quickly. And Paul will attest, because he works on our existing in-car video cameras. It's an old antiquated system, and it takes a lot of work. The new system that we would like to purchase is Axon also. And what's really nice about the Axon system, if you have the body-worn and the in-car, they're compatible, and they all go down. They download together into the same case file, so it's all kept together, and it's cloud-based, and it's a really slick system.
And apparently the lead time on between ordering and receiving the equipment is quite long.
Those are about, right now, I talked to the rep this morning, is about a year out. Once you sign a contract and order, you don't have to pay for them until they come in, but they're just so in demand, especially Axon is really an industry leader in this, in the body-worn cameras and the in-car video. So it's about a year out with in-car videos.
Yes, Councilor Banks.
I'm just curious about that. You know, if we don't have to pay until we get them, It strikes me that in a year, the price might be more. Maybe it's better if we pay now.
So once we sign the contract, we locked in that price.
Okay, awesome.
Yes, good question though. And they actually, since if there's a possibility we get it at the same time, they offered us a little bit of a discount, so we're getting, if we get both systems in the next couple months.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Next on the agenda is just touching on some old business, so we have a little bit of a dog park update.
Thanks again, Mayor. I would like to invite up to the speakers table Jerry Nelzine and Jeff Snyder to give you an update. So we had a little bit of discussion at the last council meeting about the dog park project, and a few questions came up, and some of those were more specifically around some information that we've shared out to mayor and council, as well as to interested parties in the public about our costing information and how we've broken that down. So I think there were some questions from council about perhaps having staff give a brief update at the next meeting about that information. So I've asked Jerry and Jeff if they could just kind of walk through that real quick, and then if you have any questions, we'll be happy to try to answer those.
Great. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Show's yours.
All right. So we've come up with some bid alternates to reduce the, make choices, so to speak, on what could be added into the dog park. We could walk through them one by one if you'd like, and the impact, or Jerry?
Yeah, do we have this?
I think we need to,
You guys see?
we've got that
I think we have
slide.
it as a slide for you.
Okay. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so the city administrator asked us to look into this and see what we could potentially just reduce if we needed to take the price down on the dog park and go through some of the stuff that can be taken away and the stuff that has to stay to have an actual dog park. And so on this list, you can see the base unit prices of the stuff we have to have, and then on the right-hand column, the far right, is the bid alternate column. So, you know, stuff like starting at the top, the example is the 12 by 24 steel shelter. That's something that we wouldn't necessarily need to have at the dog park. It just would keep you dry or shade in the summer. You know, the benches, same thing. The park entrance, double gates, base price. We opened that up for the fire department so that they got room to get in. Going through this, basically the stuff that all the base unit prices, I don't think we needed to go through all of them unless you wanted us to.
Maybe we can you scroll down, Melissa, to the bottom where it shows the summary? So on the first column, the more left of the two columns, is what we're calling the base price of $397,450. That's what Jerry and Jeff have worked out that are the absolute must items that we have to have. And then the right column is, as we're calling it, the bid alternates. Comes to the total, if you added them all up, is a little over $372,000. And this came out of some conversations that council was having about, you know, different specific items. The biggest one, maybe we can scroll back up again, is the $144,000, number 14, line 14 is the side. It's called the sidewalk. It's really a kind of a buffer and a walkway around the perimeter of the park that's been proposed. Is the biggest of the items, and there were some questions that came out of other conversations that, you know, can we look at ways to potentially consider items that could be taken out? And the way we're looking at this is when you do bidding, you can do things in a way that you can select. So the bidders put a price in on their when they do the bid, but you get the opportunity to select those items or to not put those in your final project. That's what the right column is. It's sort of, they're called alternate bid items, and they're products that you can select or choose to reject once you've got the full prices. that sidewalk is the one that was one of the bigger points of discussion. So I know perhaps, Jeff, I know you and I have talked about that quite a bit in terms of why that's needed or why it might be considered, but something that we certainly, I think that was the biggest thing.
I guess what we're kind of concerned about is if we don't have the sidewalk around it, is that, people will come in, we're going to start developing a mud hole right there. I look at the sidewalk as kind of a recreational opportunity. People will come in, disperse out through it. It's just something that's easier on maintenance. Something else I'd like to point out about this, we kind of developed a maintenance-friendly dog park here, and this is what was submitted to the county also. So just a caution, if we start eliminating too many things on this project, it could trigger a change or a start over with the county process.
So Jeff, to jog your memory perhaps, were you going to use the sidewalk? Because I know maintenance and mowing up next to it is an issue, but is also the idea of where you're going to put this fence and how you're going to secure the fence, is that also an issue with that?
Yeah, and that was really a maintenance consideration, so I wouldn't have to have someone out there string trimming around it or edging it. We could just run the lawnmower right around the edge and be in and out.
Okay.
Like I said,
does it make a more secure fence, I guess, too?
Yeah, definitely. No dogs could dig underneath of it or other animals come in. So.
All right.
But again, the bigger point, not to get too far down into the details unless you would like to drill down further on any questions, council, but the bigger point was we were specifically asked if we could present this current cost estimate sheet that we had in a way that we could show items that might be considered for leaving in or taking out. And that's, we're operating under the assumption that this is how we'll bid the project, and then we would bring it back, and those items that are lined out as alternate items would be discussed at the time where we approved a bid. I would also like to remind, and we've talked about this on other occasions, that we're still working through the land use processes. We believe that the city's part of it is going to be a type 1 approval, which means the planning director gets to make that approval. That doesn't go to planning commission, but we're still working through the land use on the county side. And what we've come to learn, staff has been following up regularly, including just very recently in the last few days, to touch base with the county staff that are working on this. We just basically kind of keep getting the answer that they're working on it, and that's the best we can do. What seems to be at the heart of that issue with the county, on the city side of things, it's pretty straightforward approval process for us. On the county side, because it's outside not just the city limits, but it's outside the urban growth boundary, that has added some additional challenges and kind of more around some of the specifics of the irrigation system and bringing some of the utilities out into the UGB or non-UGB area. Just all that just to simply say the county is working through it. We're waiting for their response, and it seems that this is a unique request to put some city amenities into a non-UGB area. We think we've got good justification, and what they look at is concerns about future promotion of growth by adding utilities, but those utilities go out into an undeveloped open space beyond the dog park, and it has a lot of restrictions. So we're not concerned about that, but the county is really we're waiting for that response. The other piece that I want to remind on this is the cost estimate that we have there is based on the existing concept plan that we've been working on as our foundation of the idea of what we're trying to do. Should that change with any of the land use approval processes, in other words, if they give us something that says we need to do something different, we would have to revise and then update that cost estimate. And that cost estimate is about a year old now, so we'll have to refresh that anyway. But we're working towards trying to get to a final design based on everything that we have in front of us, and then revisiting that costing. But this is the way that we would propose to do the bidding, is this alternate items type of bidding, which is not an unusual way to do public bids. So I think just generally we wanted to also just be available for any questions. We've got our two content experts here to answer any questions you might have. So.
Any questions for yes, Councilor Barwick?
Just to get a little bit of clarity on a couple things that I think I heard you say. So the base versus the alternate plan, that'll be up to council to decide which pieces we put in. So
that's right.
Right now we're talking about a way to make it cheaper. That doesn't mean we're going to necessarily make it cheaper. We just have an opportunity to.
It would be presented to council for your decision.
And then I think I heard you guys say that making it cheaper affects the quality of the park, correct? It doesn't make it a good park. It makes it a cheap park.
Correct. Yeah, some of this stuff that if it did decide to be taken away we believe would make more maintenance and not as good a park for the public.
Which then would end up costing us more money in the future in upgrades, fixing the problems.
We think we would be asked to put it in later.
So it might make it cheaper now, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for the long run. And then as far as the base prices, if we had the opportunity to look at other locations, do you think, and this is maybe just asking questions that are unanswerable, do you think that some of those things that are add-ons would still make a good park if it was in a different location?
That's a tough question.
Tough question to answer.
On the location.
I won't make you answer it. I won't make you answer it. And then fixing the cost doesn't fix any other concerns except for just the cost, right? Location, whatnot, noise, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't.
That's all issues that have been brought up.
Other issues. Okay, yeah, I just wanted some clarity on those. Thanks.
Bet.
Yes, Councilor Marine.
Can you clarify for me where exactly the sidewalk that we're discussing is on the schematic there?
Yeah, Councilor Marine, and this is just, unit prices for the entire sidewalk. Some of the sidewalk would have to go in with the development. So everything you kind of see, the fencing going around is part of that, including the sidewalk on Territorial, which would be required to go in with the project, even if we eliminated it. So there would still be cost.
And in the parking lot.
The parking in front of the parking lot, all the way along Territorial, up through the field, around. And so every bit of that white part you see with the black dots in it would be part of that. That's okay. Except there's a little bit on the corner, the ADA ramp and stuff like that is being put in with our Territorial project. So a little bit of this got done with the Territorial project, not
So
much.
you actually have a sidewalk going all the way around the park?
Yes, that's kind of what we would like to see happen on this, just so people could walk in and then maybe walk around that sidewalk, so they're not just congregating in a.
So that's on the outside of the fence, right?
The inside. We would, the one on Territorial would potentially be both sides of the fence, but the rest of them would be on the inside.
Oh, that's what the split is?
Yep, exactly. So it'd work as pedestrian access with ADA crossing mid-block on Territorial, which would help. We would like the people coming from Willow Creek and up in that area to cross there and get on the other side of the street where we have sidewalk that we just currently installed.
Okay.
Just to add on to that, just to make sure it's clear what we're saying, Councilor Marine, is we're calling it, we're referring to it as generally as a sidewalk, but it's those areas that are outside the fence would technically be a sidewalk. Inside the fence is more of a, kind of think of it as a hard surface path inside the park. It happens to abut the fence, but it's on the inside of the fence in the park for the users to move around the perimeter without walking through what potentially could be, wet and kind of muddy conditions on different times of the year, but also then it provides for those maintenance issues that Jeff and Jerry talked about as well. So I just want to make sure we were clear on what a sidewalk meant. It's actually a hard surface within, some of it's outside the fence, some of it's inside the fence.
Council President Hensley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not to beat the sidewalk to death, but I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. Some of those pieces are required and aren't part of that 144?
No, they're included in the 144 on that estimate back in October 21.
So we don't know how much of that 144 is optional, how much is like you said by the parking lot would be required regardless. So there's a portion of that 144 that's not optional,
Correct.
but we don't know how much. Okay.
No.
And the second piece of my question has escaped my brain. Come back to me.
Yeah, Councilor Hensley, just on the square footage of all that is what this estimate, we could get you off of this time estimates, we could get you that answer if you needed it.
Okay, I remembered my second piece now. So again, on the numbers then, Scott, you said that this cost estimate is a year old now, so this is pre-inflationary pricing. These base prices even going to go up potentially?
Potentially, yeah. We know what's going on in the market, but the other part of it is just what we end up with, the exact final components and design would also influence that.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. You guys brought up the sidewalk crossing territorial there. Is that included in the estimate as well? And what kind of security or safety options are we have? Flashing lights there? Is it just going to be a plain crosswalk?
It would be a mid-block crossing without flashing lights, but signed with Continental crossing and ADA ramps. And that is an option too. That could be removed if we thought. We just put that in there just because we want to really safety, promote the people to cross up there instead of down at the intersection.
Yeah, well, I think that if you have people crossing there, territorial kind of curves right there, so I think you probably want something, more signage, and I would say if you're going to do that, we probably need an illuminated light to get people across there. But
we're when the Ivy Street project's complete, those are getting upgraded, and we're going to have a couple extras floating around. So maybe potentially working with traffic safety and make a recommendation. Maybe one could go there eventually or something, if that goes in.
Yes, Councilor Banks.
Continental crosswalk? Can you explain that?
The Continental is what the Public Works crew calls the ones that they're parallel with the road, that the cars drive over them so they don't wear them out, rather than a solid white stripe across the road.
Okay.
The idea is they don't wear as fast because you're straddling them. And you don't run over the white line because it's not crossing with full.
So like a ladder pattern?
Exactly.
Okay. The second question here, is there any barrier, is this a sidewalk right here?
Yeah.
What is this line?
It's a sidewalk to the bathroom.
That's
okay, so right here, there's no barrier to go from here to here.
No.
So people could park here, and if they didn't want to use the fenced dog park, but wanted to continue to use the dog park there that the people use, they could still do that and use that parking lot.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
That could be the really active dog area.
Yeah.
Really active. Watch out by our four-way.
Yeah, and then you probably have all seen the construction going on. The sidewalk's been installed between two parks. We're getting ready to do the ADA ramps, and when that's complete, there'll be a four-way stop installed there shortly. Okay. So that's going to be done very soon.
Great. Any other questions for Jerry and Jeff at all? No? Okay. I do have a couple of comment cards here for that people want to address us on this matter. So with Melissa, with are Susan and Robert still online there?
Robert and Susan are still there, yes.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Because I know that they had written in, so Susan and Robert had written in requesting to speak on this matter, but to sell their time to, they each wanted 3 minutes to speak on the matter, but they're selling their time to Jason Patton.
Not selling, they're
Sorry,
pulling
not
my
selling.
time.
You're
I'm
pulling your
not
time.
paying for anything.
He did not
They're-
purchase it.
They're deferring their time
That's
to
why at
Jason
planning
Patton.
commission meetings, I've changed it to pooling time instead of paying, because I
Yes.
don't want any questions about that. Okay, so.
Well stated. So Jason, you have 9 minutes, 3 of your own and 3 from each of Mr. and Mrs. Bitter.
Excellent, and I wanted to thank them for sticking it out through all of this so I could pool my time with theirs to go through all of these talking points. So I have been watching this whole dog park thing from afar. I've been listening online to some of the comments, and I felt that it was time for me to come in and at least weigh in on some of these topics. So first of all, in general, there's quite a bit of talk about folks being upset with the cost of this dog park. You've just talked about this. And I would say this dog park is not going to get any cheaper. If it had been moved forward with years ago when it first came up and the 3 subsequent times it came up after that, it would be even cheaper than it is now. And if you think that putting it on a shelf and bringing it off of the shelf in another 3 to 4 years is going to make it cheaper, then why did you go ahead and pre-purchase bus shelters for when they'll be used in a few years? So I think you understand the cost ramifications of either moving forward with this dog park now or shelving it and waiting to do it later and have it cost even more. Another thing I want to just point out is a lot of people are talking about using the existing system. And I will point out that the city of Canby actually has a leash law, 6.08.020, running at large. Animals and fowl are not to be permitted to run at large. No person owning or having in his or her custody animals or fowl shall permit same to go at large to the injury or allowance of or annoyance of others, nor shall the animal or fowl be permitted at large upon the street or public ways of the city. This action is declared to be a nuisance and a danger to the public health and safety. So anybody who is promoting the current process is essentially flying a flag in the face of Canby's laws and ordinances. I don't see how, as a council or as a citizenry, it makes sense to continue to do that, especially as the city grows. Another thing I just wanted to say is I watched the dog park meeting. When I got the flyer for the dog park, I was under the impression that dog park meeting was to be an opportunity for members of the community to come out and have a discussion about amenities to go into the dog park so a price could be put forward. What I saw was a meeting of similar folks who have been here before the council before, airing the same grievances. And the people who actually showed up to participate in the discussion and the spirit of that meeting were whisked away to a room where no one got a chance to see what that process was. In my opinion, the roles in that meeting should have been reversed. The facilitator and the camera time should have been given to those who were here to talk about what the spirit of that meeting was about, and the individuals who wished to air their grievances could have gone to the other room and a separate recording could have been done and made available to the citizens. Now I want to talk about alternate locations. I've heard a lot about this. In general, folks are quoting dog park standards. I can tell you that of the Hondo pits, the current location, and the state park, none of them tick all the boxes. I've read them, none of them tick all the boxes. So it doesn't matter. Wherever you pick, it's not going to fit all of those criteria. The proposed location ties in with other parks within the current system, both the logging trail, eco park, and the walk along the river. The other locations do not. The closest park that it ties into with the city at Hondo Pits is the skate park. Now we'll go into the Hondo Pits. These are some of the reasons why the Hondo Pits would not work. First of all, traffic. People are talking about how this particular site that's being proposed would be horrible for traffic. Let's face it, there's the police station and industrial park, 2 housing developments and the skate park that all feed in and use the access of Northwest 3rd Avenue and North Cedar. If you put a dog park over there, it isn't going to benefit from the traffic. It will only make it worse over there. So that, for me, is off the table. From the train has been mentioned a few times. Yes, the traffic over on Territory could impact the dogs. But as the train goes through the Hondo pits, not only you have the noise, but you have the vibration from the train. And we all know how dogs freak out about fireworks. It's not just the noise, it's about the concussion of the firework going off. So to me, it makes no sense. Also, it's an old landfill. We all remember back when they were building those houses, at least I remember when they were building those houses, there was a ton of mitigation that had to go into developing that land because there's a bunch of garbage under it. What happens when the city starts digging that up to put in fences or a bathroom or, a shelter, and they run into a bunch of garbage? Now all of a sudden your cost overrun is even worse because you're having to put a bunch of mitigation into the site. And the big one for me is the security for the police station. That police station was built with the effort to make it last for many years. If you have people parking down there, because let's face it, the parking that was put into the police station was based on that building. If you want to stick with parking standards, the parking standards for a dog park are not going to be able to just use that existing parking. You're going to have to put in more, and it will likely be down below the police station. And do you really want a bunch of random people parking below the police station, especially when in 10 to 15 years they may need to get into that downstairs and use it? So for me, that is a big one. The other one is there's a long-term plan to have Bird Parkway come over the railroad tracks, and it would cut right through that area. It would serve as the only above railroad crossing in the city. This is something that's been talked about even years ago when I was on city council, and from what I understand, it's still part of the larger plan. Now for the Molalla River State Park. This one's going to be a little easier. It is even further away from the city core than any of the other locations. And when it comes to the sidewalk, I checked it. It is almost a mile and a half of unsidewalked route that would need to be traversed to get from the sidewalk at North Holly and Territorial to the first section of sidewalk in the Molalla River State Park. That mile and a half is excluding the new section of sidewalk that was put in with the new development over there. So it makes it completely inaccessible to anybody who is really walking or someone who has ADA capacity problems. The other one, and this is the one that just absolutely kills me, why would you invest city taxpayer money on property that you don't own? What have you not learned from the pool and the adult center? This was a problem even when I was on city council. It's a problem now that I'm on the city budget committee. Why would you spend taxpayer money on property that is not owned by the city, that you have no control over? That if you put it in there, the state could come in at any point in time and say, thanks for all of that, but now you can't use it, we're yarding it out because we have other plans down there. So in the end, for all the people who say there's alternate locations, there's really not. Because the other problem is the parks have not purchased any large tracts of land for something like this, which is another huge thing that I hope gets taken care of now that the Parks Master Plan is done. So I hope that I've saved the city some money by giving you some rundown of these alternate sites that people keep talking about and why they really don't work, and why the current site that's being proposed and has been proposed for years is really the one that should be done. And what should be happening is while you're talking about building that one, you need to be working with the parks people and figuring out where you're going to purchase land on the other side of town to build the second dog park in the next couple of years. If you really want to help the citizens of this community, that's the route you should be taking for, rather than continuing to beat this horse to glue. And so that's all I have. And I reserve my 5 seconds for a future meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. The next yellow card I have is for Kara Hawkins, and you're what was your phrase, Jason?
Pooling.
Pooling your time and giving it to Mary Doak, is that correct? Absolutely. All right, thank you. Mary, you have 6 minutes.
Oh, good. I would like to pass these out. Should I do it or have somebody listen?
You just want to give them to Melissa and she'll get them to us?
Thank you. Mayor Hudson, city councilors, thanks again for letting me come talk to you. Mr. Padden, you had some interesting points. It's nice to finally hear something from somebody who thinks that the territorial site is a good place to build a dog park. You and I don't agree on much, but it's nice to hear some opposition. So, the last time I was here talking to the city council on why I'm opposed to the location of the city park, Councilman Parker made a comment after I was through speaking that he felt like we were just crowdsourcing, and he felt like we should just go ahead and get the park built. I took that as not a compliment, but when I got home, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, I'm not real sure what crowdsourcing is. So I looked it up, and actually, Councilor Parker, you gave us a compliment. For those of you who do not know the definition of crowdsourcing, it is to obtain information by enlisting the services or opinions of a large number of people to obtain needed knowledge. It's a process to solicit ideas to expose one's biases. It's also called wisdom of the crowds, and many, many large corporations use this method for their decision making. So I think I should say thank you for the compliment. We are doing your work for you. We have had many, many people. I've interviewed so many people, over 100 more, about the dog park, and I have a lot of information on that just here in Canby. If you will, if you're interested, I'd be glad to tell you. The problem I'm seeing here is that this is what, my third, fourth time here, and I've written letters to the editor, I've posted things on the internet, and yet when I come to this council meeting, I feel like I'm talking to deaf ears. I think your mind is made up. You're not listening. Now, Councilor Marine, I've received this in the mail, your brochure.
Miss Doak, if you just can keep to the comments about the dog park and direct
Okay,
them to me, I appreciate
I'm
it.
just saying that you're not all listening, and it's very frustrating. And when you say that you are, and then I come here and see in reality. Now, Councilor Parker, I get the impression.
Thanks, Chris. I'm working on it, okay? Thank you. Ms. Doak, if you could please address your comments.
Okay. I
Not
will.
directly at the councilors, but to me.
I just wanted to tell him that I felt like you were at least interactive, and I appreciate your comments. I am curious about the process or what guidelines you used for vetting. And I have not heard anything from anybody about what your criteria has been. And when I ask the question, I don't feel like answers are forthright. So you have your bright green paper here. I took the liberty of putting together this little, and it's only an 8-point vetting that, and I was comparing territorial to Molalla River State Park. So I will go over these and give you my opinion. And 1 through 4, does it have parking? Does it have electricity? Does it have water and public restrooms? And the territorial one doesn't have any of those, and they're very high-cost items. If we're looking at Molalla River State Park, they at least have those items. Now, this is not saying that Molalla State Park is the only other alternative. I think we just need to look at possibilities. Then can it be built without removal of trees? Last week, there were some comments made about the dilemmas that y'all are faced with all the development, and it's either put on good farmland or cutting down trees, both of which are very painful. The trees, I think both of those are just what make Canby what it is and make it desirable. We have to use the farmland if we're going to build buildings, but we don't have to cut down trees, or at least not as, we have some option on that. And the territorial road, you're going to have to cut down several trees. These are fir trees, they're beautiful. Why cut them down if we don't have to? And the Molalla River State Park doesn't require having to cut down trees. And I think that's one of the things that really needs to be considered when you're looking at a site to put the dog park. Now, away from a busy road and the emergency, if you've ever been around a dog.
Ms. Doe, I'm sorry, your 6 minutes is up.
Oh, is it up?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay,
But-
well, thank you for listening to me.
No, I appreciate you coming, and I thank you for the scorecard here for reference. To answer the question on the vetting aspect, I'll look to Jerry and Jeff here on some history, so please jump up and correct me when I'm incorrect, which is probably highly likely. The vetting of the different dog park options it has been a long conversation for, I would say, 15 plus years. And it has definitely, the conversation has moved around the city in terms of where is the best location, where do we put it, where would that conversation be? In terms of where this recent decision to go this route, I don't know if there was a specific, let's line up the potential options and pick one. This was the one that was, I think, the most recently vetted location for a dog park, the one territorial, and that's what the council decided to move forward with, was the most recent vetted location, which was the location there at territorial. So that's how we've ended up at this location. That was the most recent one vetted, and that was the one that, though not necessarily unanimously done, but the council decided that was the spot to move forward on. So that's where, so I hope that answers your question on that aspect.
I appreciate that. Is there a list of criteria that you used for the vetting?
Jeff and Jerry, I don't know if there necessarily was a list of items. Somebody want to tackle that one right now, or do we need to look into that?
We have information from when this originally that I could share with the city administrator. That maybe
I would appreciate that, because it seems that nobody really is coordinated.
No, and that, Ms. Doak, that's part of the, things grind slowly. And when we're looking at executing something like this that has been discussed for 15 plus years, it has been discussed, put on the shelf, pulled off, the dust blown off of it, re-looked at, reshelved, and which is not, unfortunately, is not uncommon with a lot of the projects that come about. And so I think what we have right now is something that the council felt was something that we could move forward on as a we'll say is a quote unquote low hanging fruit item to get accomplished and meet a community request / want. And so that's why this is moved the way that it has. And so right now, that's kind of the status that we're at, is that the last rendition of the plan was Territorial Park was looked at as the best option for a dog park that would be able to meet the needs or the criteria that people wanted. And that was an area that could be divided into large dog, small dog, or active shot, however that ends up being delineated. So so some of the criteria, Jeff and Jerry will get, and I'm sure we'll pass that through the city manager and the city recorder to us as well as to the public.
Is there any way, it seems like this is just going so quickly now. I mean, it's just railroading. And so many people have stepped forward and said, wait a minute, let's revisit this. And I appreciate that this has been revisited. But I think it needs to slow down, because so many people are coming forward and saying, this isn't going to work. We're looking at it differently now than it was being looked at a number of years ago. In that survey, I said, yeah, it'd be nice to have a dog park. My opinion of dog parks has changed since I have taken my dog to several dog parks. My opinion on dog parks has totally changed. So even though I answered yes a few years ago, I would say no now. I've talked to people who have said, yeah, I think Canby needs a dog park, and I would say, would you take your dog there? No. So these need to be considered for current information.
I believe that the counselors and myself have been listening. I don't know. I mean, I'll speak on my behalf in that, I do, I've had a number of emails that have sent to me about the subject of the dog park. I've had lovely conversations in the middle of, local grocery store, buying milk and bread. So, and ice cream. But, I mean, so I do believe that the counselors are hearing all the feedback that's coming in. And so, and
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and at the end of the day, it's hard to say. I mean, right now we're at the county for the dog park waiting to be approved by, on the county side of things. Since this kind of started in motion, it's been almost a year, at least this phase of it, of where we've been at with the planning and the drafting and getting it moved through in those processes. So that to some, that's not fast enough, and to others, that's way too fast. And so again, it's hard. I wish I had more to be able to say that this has been, I don't know what the right speed on a project is. I want certain projects done three years ago, right, Jerry? I'm still waiting on Walnut to get done. So, but, so it is the process and the grind that sometimes government moves at in that regard. So I do appreciate you coming and following this issue as closely as you have. It's not a done conversation. I'm sure we'll have several more conversations before, it comes back from the county and whatnot. So I appreciate you very much coming.
I just ask the council to take into consideration the current information that is being given to you, not what was from a survey that was done from a number of years ago.
And
we're bringing you current information.
And we're taking all that in.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All that I have on cards. I don't know if there's any questions or discussion for staff on what was shared regarding pricing pieces and whatnot. No. They're more more information to come back. I think it was just an update on where we were at, so. Okay. I'm gonna move into mayor's business. A couple of things. So Clackamas County Coordinating Committee is tomorrow. I'll have an update at the next meeting. The Parks Advisory Board met last week. Yeah. Thank you. Last week, and the big conversation piece was Mr. Archer presented the kind of the synopsis of park plans and ideas and thoughts that we would use as the framework for the CIP, and those did go to the Parks Board, and they approved that list as well as being something that they saw as a great roadmap to go off and create the CIP. Capital improvement plan. Thank you. I had to think about. I wanted to say construction. It's capital improvement plan for CIP for parks based on the Parks Master Plan, and then the city manager working with Jeff to and parks to kind of streamline what could be done and how quickly, or timelines and whatnot. So that was the big conversation piece there. In the packet, I asked Scott to put in there for your consideration. So the Oregon Mayors Association is looking to take to, so OMA, Oregon Mayors Association, had a task force put together on the homelessness issue that's in the Portland metro area and the surrounding area. And so they're asking for support to be able to take to the legislature as a potential solution to push the decision-making down to the cities, and having it be less of a solely a state issue or just a Portland issue. And so what's asked is our support, or mine, from being on the Oregon Mayors Association to sign on to this ask, which is basically go to the state legislature and ask for we'll round up $124 million to be doled out to the cities in the Portland metro area to address and start putting towards homelessness issues. Basically, it equates to about $40 per resident that would come out on an annual basis to the city of Canby and the other cities to put forth to that. So it's a tremendously huge amount of money. I don't see that gaining much traction in that amount, but I think the sentiment is there that something needs to be done on a grander scale than what's been done at this point. So I included it to get your guys' this council's input before I either send back, and I didn't think that this was something solely on my part to sign on. Most of that stuff is or may not be, but this one I felt I needed council input or thoughts. So I will turn it to you. Yes, Council President.
Clarifying question, I suppose it'd be, so the ask isn't an overturn of HB 3115, but rather money to support the cities in trying to implement it? I mean, I'm concerned with the ask because any government money comes with government strings, so I'm just kind of wondering what that relationship would look like if we were to take that money.
That is a good question. I can take that back and to the OMA and ask them what the strings would look like if that were the case. I agree with you that there tends to be some red tape sometimes and have to do these kinds of things, but I can definitely ask what that looks like.
Brian?
Yes, Councilor Parker.
Yeah, you've got my support on this, and this is actually a change of heart for me. For decades, I've never thought that cities needed to get into this that our funding streams are from the state to the county in these areas, and the city doesn't have a funding stream.
Right.
But I think we're in a different climate now, and I think it's a good conversation to have whether we need to change our policies and give cities the tools to directly affect homelessness. So Tracy's mentioned some good things. Other questions would be, what would it look like on the ground? But I think for the purposes of the context of a legislative discussion, you bet. Let's have this discussion. Should cities have a state funded pipeline for them to address things instead of having to work through the counties? Because I don't know anyone who really thinks that what we're doing right now is working, and maybe some on-the-ground stuff in the individual cities would help. So,
yeah, I mean, and that's the piece. Like you look at the I mean, if the state were to actually accept that, you're looking, you know, the city of Canby getting $750,000 towards, you know, homeless pieces. So right now, and that's, you go, well, Canby have a homeless issue. Well, sometimes it's what's not seen that is an issue, and we do have some of that here in and around Canby. So, but if we don't address some of these things, then it does become a bigger issue.
Thank you for bringing it.
Yeah. Other, Councilor Varga?
Yeah, I share the same concerns as Councilor Hensley about, you know, the strings attached to it. I think that it's absolutely a conversation that we need to have. The crisis does not seem to be getting any better. It keeps getting worse. And, you know, the other concern that I have is if we do bring it to the city level, what does that do to our staff levels? You know, how does that affect our police force? How does it affect, you know, city staff and whatnot in making the policies happen? I think it's absolutely worth the conversation. It's worth it to get behind it and see what they say. But I want us to ask a lot of questions of what that would entail if we do bring it down to the city level. So I think it could actually be very helpful to us to bring it into the city level. It might give us more resources and opportunities to help people instead of, you know, not helping them. So, but yeah, ask questions, but move forward.
Okay. Councilor Banks, Councilor Marine, anything?
I would just say that one thing, a program like this, although I would be surprised if the legislature goes along with it, is you find that you get 10 or 15 different kinds of approaches. Some of those are going to end up being good ideas. Mm-hmm. And you know, some of them aren't, but good ideas are in short order right now. As Councilor Barwig said, you know, what we're doing here is clearly not working in Portland, and Salem and Eugene are in crisis. Canby's not, but you know, Canby could find out the solution for Portland, Salem, or Eugene, or somebody could. Someone's probably got the right plans. I'd say try anything.
Well, and Councilor Banks, you know, thank you for that, because I think sometimes we get into that mindset of you know, there's a perfect circle to put into the round hole to make it work, and it's not always the case, and we don't have a silver bullet, that it's probably several that are needed to get this, you know, something happening and corrected. So, all right. Councilor Marine, anything?
Well, this is one of those cases where I find myself in agreement with everybody here. I don't see any downside here, but we've got to be very cautious. There probably are some serious strings attached that we need to make sure that you know, it's a resource that we want to take advantage of.
So hesitantly cautious. Did you have something else?
I was just going to add to your point that you mentioned, you know, in the different approaches that, you know, one approach might work for one person and that same approach might not work for the next person. So we probably need several different approaches. So
I agree.
Mayor Hodson?
Yes.
May I interject just a little bit of information that might help clarify some of the questions and conversation? I'm just kind of reading the letter from the OMA, and it is in the packet. It talks about, so the request, the way it describes the request that would come from the OMA to be made to the legislature in the 23 session is two components. One is a direct allocations to the cities, and the other one is a capital component that would go towards building shelters, transitional housing, and some other things. The direct allocation piece, there's some questions about what kinds of strings would be attached or whatever, and I'm sure there would have to be some legislation developed around what that would look like. But what it says in the letter is that OMA's proposal would provide that the cities have the ability to elect to use their funds for their own homelessness response and prevention services, or redirect their funds to community partners who are required to use the funds for these types of things. And then a little bit later in the letter, it says OMA's proposal states that the funds must be used for homeless response and prevention services, which may include, and then it lists about 12 or so different items, abatement, cleanup, food assistance, shelter, hygiene, just a number of different things. So I think some of those questions are sort of kind of at a high level spelled out in the letter. I think my guess is the specifics of the legislation and how that would happen if it were to be supported would have to be worked on, and that would take some time probably with the legislative proposal. So some of that is kind of answered in that letter where it describes some of what it would be used for, but it looks like it's sort of loosely described in some ways too. So.
Thank you, Scott. Okay. Well, I appreciate all your input on that, and we'll see what comes of this. So, trying something. Okay. I just wanted to say also thank you to the downtown businesses for the Halloween Spooky Village. It looked like the turnout was again fantastic for that. 2 community events coming up. Bridging Cultures will be doing their Thanksgiving dinner, community dinner on November 19th. And that's going to be from 5 to 7 p.m. at Baker Prairie Middle School. And then the Light the Night event is going to be happening on December 2nd. Parade starts, I think it's 6 o'clock is the usual start time. And I think we've got Santa and lights galore. Right, Jerry and Jeff? More lights than last year? Every year.
It's not doing it on first Thursday, though.
It is not on first Thursday. It is that first Friday. Yes. That's all that I've got tonight. Councilor Parker, anything on the council front?
My committees haven't met this night.
Okay, thank you, sir. Council President Hensley, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, being the second of the month, my committees haven't met yet, but I do have 2 little quick announcements. Ray Keene and I made a presentation at the chamber yesterday, and we're going to make the same or very similar presentation to the Rotary Club next week regarding the Canby Suicide Prevention Task Force and kind of where we've been, where we're going, and kind of a plea for more members. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there now as a plea to the community at large. And you'll probably be seeing our PSA that we did a couple years ago. That'll probably start airing here soon throughout the holiday season. Just as a reminder that folks, for some people this is a very happy time of year, and for some it's just really not. And just kind of reach out and let people know they're not alone. And if there's something kind of bringing them down this season, reach out and maybe take them for a cup of coffee and bring them back up. Also have a Canby Center Food Bank fundraiser event coming this Saturday at Gwynn's Coffee House. Doors open at 6:15 p.m. and it's going to be a good time. It's Great Gatsby themed, so come dressed up or not. It's not required, but there will be a costume contest for those who choose to participate in that. It's $15 and a food item at the door. You get raffle tickets, and there'll be a speakeasy and music and a good time. So come out and enjoy yourself, and all the proceeds from that event go to the Canby Center Food Bank. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Counselor Farwick.
Yes, sir. I was going to mention that presentation that you did at the chamber lunch, and it was a very good presentation. And one of the things that you just mentioned that I took from it is the opportunity. One of the things that was said was, you don't always. People don't. I can't remember how you guys said it, but basically, don't be afraid to ask the question of, "Are you struggling?"
But stigma is, there's no
stigma around that. Yeah, and if people are struggling, if you're afraid to ask the question and they are, and something happens, don't be afraid to ask the question, because you might save their life. So I'm taking them out for a cup of coffee or whatnot. So thank you for making that presentation. It was great. I attended the Clackamas Cities dinner along with several of you from here. I think all of us that are up here were there. It was great to be back with our colleagues from other cities and to have some fun with them and learn about what's going on in their cities. The last planning commission meeting was canceled, so I don't have a report there, and Jason gave a great update already tonight, so I won't bore you by saying the exact same things that he said, but I will repeat, there is a position on the planning commission. And so I know there's a lot of people running for these seats right now, and there's 7 of us running and only 3 seats available. So I will say what I say after every election is that for those who are running for a position that do not get it, I expect that you will be applying for the planning commission opening.
There you go.
There's lots going on at the fire department, and Chief Davis was going to come up and give us a quick update on that.
Thank you. And it's nice having George here with me. I know he's got my back. Okay, yeah, lots going on at the fire department. Just so you're aware, the fire department's currently updating our strategic plan, very similar to the city's strategic plan, and then the board will receive the draft of our strategic plan in December, hopefully approving it in January prior to the start of the budget year. Our strategic plan is good in the fact that it's not, it's a document we use. We did one in 2015, 2017, and 2020. We typically go for 2 to 3 years, and we seem to accomplish pretty much all the objectives for the most part in about 1.5 years, 2 years. Some of those major highlights are the EMS station, Northside Station finally is up and operational and working very, very well. We lowered the insurance standard office rating for the city as well as the fire district, as you know, to a class 2. Well, we just got re-rated again, and we were told that we may be even lower in the rural areas without water supply down to a class 2, which is very good. 1 being the best, 10 being the worst. And there's no 1s in the state. So we're doing very well as a class 2 department. So all those things are worked on through the strategic planning process, but we have some significant challenges that we're going to be dealing with in this next strategic plan, probably more so than we ever did in 2015 when I came on board. Just in the state of the economy, increase of call volume, those type of things that we have to look at. How do we do things differently? How do we look at partnering with the police department, with our community paramedic and mental health, and how do we stop going on repeat calls over and over and over again? Those are some dilemmas that we have to look at that are going to be challenging us as we move forward. As I said, call volume is going through the roof on us. Last Friday night, we had 6 calls go down at one time. Before it used to be 3 calls, and now it's 6 calls, and including going all the way over to cover in Washington County when Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue had a significant fire where they had a mass casualty. And we had to move over to Tigard and Beaverton to help run medical calls over there. So some of those things are really changing how we do business. We're currently working on an issue in the county in regards to Dryland Road, where we've had multiple fatalities on that stretch between Maxburg going out towards Bernards. There's a big hump in the road out there. Well, I personally now have been on 6 fatalities out there. And this last weekend or weekend before last, we had a dual fatality out there. Father and his child died on an accident at that same location. So we're sending information on through the county to see what we can do about getting that fixed or getting some guardrails put up there to try to cut that off. Workforce, we're like any other agency right now, is workforce is a huge issue for us. Whereas before we could get 200, 300, 400 people applying for firefighter jobs, and this last list we had 9 firefighter medics, and we've already, between us and Wallala, they've already hired 3 off that list. So we're going to be retesting again. But we also want to look at how do we integrate the bridging cultures, the Latino population. How do we work better with the high school in preparation for our internship programs? And how do we solicit more female candidates for the firefighter paramedic positions? So we'll be working on that. Compliments to the Canby Police Department. We have a tremendous partnership with the Canby Police Department, especially as we respond on cardiac arrest. The officers do a tremendous job, many times arriving before us and starting CPR. Well, I'm pleased to announce that we did have a save of a younger gentleman who went into cardiac arrest, and it worked the way it should have. The dispatch agency did a tremendous job. The police officer on scene did a tremendous job. We shocked twice and brought the victim back, and he's alive and back with his family as we speak. So hats off to the police department on their responses to these cardiac arrests too. Canby Rotary ready. Pleased to announce that the Rotary project phase 1 is completed. We have multiple generators put out at the public works site in the building that the Rotary funded along with chainsaws, and that's now under the control of the fire department as far as checkout goes and our procedures in the event of another significant ice storm. Just this last wind event that we had, the red flag warning that we had, we actually had a car take out a telephone pole. It was a very small area power outage during that time frame, but we had to give out three generators to people on life support. So hats off to the Rotary for that phase 1 of the project. Phase 2 that we're currently working on with the Rotary is to get some communication trailers put out to where people can go out and charge their cell phones when power's out, and also to access the internet. And we're working on that with the Rotary, working with Canby Utility in regards to emergency water supplies, and trying to get the well up at Baker Prairie activated again, get generators on that, and trying to find some potable water tankers or buffaloes that we can have emergency water. So we have a lot going on right now, but that's thank you for allowing me to give you a quick update. I know I haven't seen you or done an update for the last few meetings, but thanks for asking.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. The last thing that I'll just say is a reminder that next Tuesday is Election Day, and no matter what your affiliation, make sure you make your voice heard and vote, vote, vote.
And turn your clocks back Saturday night.
Oh,
Or no,
yeah.
forward. No, fall back.
Fall back. Extra hour of sleep Sunday.
Yeah, come to the party Saturday night and you get an extra hour's sleep.
Councilor Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to apologize for missing the last meeting. I was at parent conferences. By way of segueing then into the school district report, we had conferences recently, and the high school is on a trimester schedule, and the final exams are this month. We're kind of winding the first term down. The middle school and elementary schools are not on a trimester schedule, so they finish in mid-late January, like the semester systems do. And we've transitioned from fall sports to winter sports, I think in all sports now. I don't think we have any lingering playoff teams remaining. So yeah, still plugging away. The Library Advisory Board met the day before our last council meeting, the same day as the political forum that we had here, the candidates. And I attended the forum and not the Library Advisory Board meeting. Scott already told us about the hires, which I think was the big news coming out of the library. I wanted to talk a little bit about Mrs. Doak's comments regarding the dog park. And she had said that no one had commented on the vetting of the property in response to her questions at the last meeting. I think that Councilor Spoon did, but I also believe that that meeting was very late. I watched it on YouTube later, and it looked like it was a 4-hour meeting. But I wanted to say I also have gone to all of the sites that have been discussed. I know that Councilor Parker joined me in one of those tours of the Honda pits, and the Honda pits are a problematic site. There's a wetlands running through it. The parking problems, as Mr. Padden identified, make it a challenge. And there's a sewer pump station that doesn't smell good, which may not be bad for dogs, but for dog owners perhaps. There was a homeless person in the bushes that harassed us a little bit when we were doing the tour. But the criteria I used that Mrs. Doak had asked about are the same criteria that the parks master plan identified for siting dog parks. The accessibility, safety, security, flat, so forth. The reason I support putting the dog park at the location we've been talking about is because the master plan says that the dog park is the number 2 desired entity, and this is a current data. This is not data from 10 years ago. This is what we spent a fair bit of money on in the last couple of years with the parks master plan. And I looked over the 360 names that were turned in. I looked over every one of those. And I just want to applaud the effort. I wish that we had that same level of community support for building something rather than not building something. And I recognized a number of people, names on there. I reached out to a number of people, and I had different reports on why they signed it. I think that there are really no way to tell what the opposition was. It wasn't solely based on the location. A lot of people were upset with the price only, which is why I think that we requested you guys to itemize those things today for the dog park. There were some concerns with those 360 signatures. They weren't all voters in town, but most of them certainly were. But there was a fair bit of misinformation that went into the collection of those. And for example, in social media posts that I had sent, like friends had sent to me, I'm not even on social media, the price was inflated. It was $1 million dog park. It was said that we can build it cheaper somewhere else, and there was no evidence ever that we could build a dog park cheaper anywhere else. That it didn't fit the siting guidelines, but we don't have any property that fits the siting guidelines any better than this particular property. That the Parks Committee had recommended a different location, but they never have. That the Parks Committee had recommended that we do not build the dog park at this site, but that didn't happen until the day before those 360 signatures were turned in. That the council isn't listening to the Parks Committee. And I just want to emphasize that we are listening, and just because we don't agree doesn't mean that we don't listen. And clearly some people on the council do agree, but there is a disagreement on that as well. It doesn't mean that we're not listening. An indication of the listening, we're working at making a cheaper dog park than it was. I saw that at the dog park community meeting, someone had said that I never came back to the full group session. And that wasn't true either. I was standing right over there where Chief Davis is. So there was a lot of misinformation that went into the collection of those signatures. And I have to rely on the survey that the Parks Master Plan had done, I think more so than those 360 signatures. I feel terrible for the people who do not want it in their neighborhood. I totally understand that. But the community wants to have a dog park. The other thing I really wanted to address is I want to emphasize to the council and to the community in general how important honesty is when we're engaged in public discourse. It's the silly season with the election a week away. But there's been a lot of false information that's going out there here in Canby as well as in the United States. There was an accusation made against me in my job from a parent I don't have about things that I never did in my classroom. And I've never had these kinds of accusations until I became a city councilor. And it alarms me. And I'm asking for honesty, not simply because it's in scripture and it's because it's ethical and because democracy requires it. Just a week ago, we saw Nancy Pelosi's husband beaten up by a perpetrator who was motivated primarily by misinformation. And these things alarm me. I wonder what the price of public service is. My wife is at home right now. Is she at risk because of misinformation going around? At the Canby City Council Forum, there was a table out front with flyers, and this one here was there, an Education Action Committee flyer, and because I'm a teacher, I grabbed it, and inside I hear that pornography is distributed in our classrooms and our school libraries. That's not true, and that's really dangerous information. It's not legal. It's a violation of our school board policies and state law. And if people believe these things, then people get angry and they commit violence. And so I just want to encourage the community to stop this madness and to concentrate on the truth. We all have an obligation to seek truth, and Canby should be above this. So I just wanted to make that comment. And that's all I have tonight.
Okay. Councilor Marie?
Councilor Banks is a hard act to follow. And I'll just piggyback on that a little bit. I completely agree with you. We are not seeing enough truth and honesty in our discourse. And I hope that doesn't continue. And I hope it isn't a real problem here in Canby. I don't want to be a Pollyanna, but for the most part, I think that it's not a huge problem here, and let's hope it doesn't become one. I want to go back and kind of amend the report I gave for Cub last time. I told you that there was going to be a rate increase, and that is only slight, or it's not 100% accurate. I went and reviewed the minutes again, and it's a fee increase. So the fees that are being charged for, people that don't pay their bill and have to be reconnected, and for new connections and all those kind of things are going up. But at this time, there's no rate increase from Cub. So that's good news.
Okay. Thank you, Art. Appreciate that. City Administrator report.
I'll be brief. 2 items. One, a reminder to Mayor and Council and to our community that we have an event tomorrow evening at the new Grant Street Arch. It's a celebration and a dedication of our Grant Street Arch and Quiet Zone project. So 6 p.m. I know some of you are going to be speaking. We have some refreshments and some other activities, so everybody is encouraged to attend. And then also that's the same time that we're doing the First Thursday event, so lots going on downtown. And then second is to announce that we'll be doing, I guess it's our second annual leaf drop-off for our city residents at the Public Works site. I see the mayor smiling over there. I think that's one of the things that you enjoyed. We did last year, but Mr. Nelzine has put this together again on December 3rd. There will be lots more information forthcoming. We'll be distributing that, but December 3rd, that's a Saturday. It'll just be an open drop-off day for leaves. You have to be a city resident, and we do need to ask that you show proof of that. And then there will be some additional times around that same time frame that people can make appointments, like on the weekdays, if you're not able to come on that Saturday. So more information forthcoming on the leaf drop-off, and that's all I've got.
Just to say, I know I forgot
PSA,
my annual PSA of
reminded him, Scott.
yeah. So my annual PSA is this: please do not rake your leaves into the street. and expect the street sweeper to come by and pick them up and take care of them. We've got great landscapers in the area that can help clean them up for you if you need it. Please don't blow them into the street, because then they cover the sewer grates that then clog up and back up, and then we, our public works guys or the occasional city councilor has to go out and clean off those grates. So please refrain from doing so. Take advantage of the leaf drop, which I appreciate Public Works doing again. I'd hate to have a conversation of stricter leaf management in the city of Canby. There's bigger things to deal with, but yes. So thank you for the the leaf reminder. Keep your streets clean, so a street sweeper doesn't have to. So second opportunity for citizen input. Going once, going twice. Sold. Action review.
You have approved the consent agenda, adopted ordinance number 1586, and passed ordinance numbers 1587, 1588 to second readings on November 16th.
Great, thank you. Councilor Barber, we already talked about getting out and making sure to vote. Please vote. That way we all then have a right to complain if we vote. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Canby, good night. Thank you for sticking with us. Have a good couple of weeks.